Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The thermometer on my dashboard read -42 when I pulled out of the Dead Horse Depot that night. At those temperatures, the distinction between Celsius and Fahrenheit becomes almost meaningless. Cold is cold. The kind of cold that makes your diesel gel if you let the engine idle too long at the wrong RPM. The kind of cold that can kill you in 15 minutes if you step outside without proper gear. I'd been driving the Dalton Highway for 11 years, and I thought I understood what the Arctic could do to a man. I was wrong. My name is Rylan Merrick, and I haul freight for Polar Express Logistics out of Fairbanks. Mostly industrial equipment, drilling supplies, sometimes frozen goods for the camps up north. The Dalton is 400 miles of gravel, ice, and isolation, stretching from just north of Fairbanks all the way to Prudhoe Bay. In summer, it is brutal. In winter, it is something else entirely. Something that gets into your bones and stays there. That November, I was running a load of pipe fittings to a maintenance facility south of Coldfoot. Routine job. I had done it maybe 200 times before. The weather report said clear skies and moderate winds, which up here means you might actually be able to see the road in front of you. I left Dead Horse around 8 in the evening, planning to drive through the night and reach Coldfoot by morning. The northern lights were out, great curtains of green and purple rippling across the sky like something alive, beautiful and eerie at the same time. For the first 3 hours, everything was normal. The road was in decent shape, hard-packed snow with patches of glare ice that my chains could handle. I passed a few trucks heading north, exchanged the usual radio greetings, and settled into the rhythm of the drive. The heater was working well, I had coffee in my thermos, and the old country station out of Fairbanks was coming in clear enough to keep me company. Just another night on the haul road. It was somewhere around mile marker 230 that things started to feel different. I cannot point to any single moment when it changed. It was more like a gradual shift, the way the light changes when a cloud passes over the sun, except there was no sun and no clouds, just the darkness, and my headlights cutting through it, and the endless white of the tundra stretching away on both sides. The first thing I noticed was the silence on the radio. Channel 19 had been quiet for a while, which was not unusual at that hour, but this felt different. Heavier somehow. I tried calling out a few times just to see if anyone was around. Prior, Dead Horse southbound at 2:30. Anybody got their ears on. Nothing. Not even static. Just a flat, empty hiss that seemed to swallow my voice. I told myself the mountains were blocking the signal. There are dead zones all along the Dalton where you cannot raise anyone no matter how hard you try. It is one of the things that makes the highway so dangerous. If you break down in the wrong spot, you might be waiting hours or even days before another truck comes along. But I had driven through those dead zones plenty of times before, and this did not feel the same. This felt like something was absorbing the radio waves, like something was listening but refusing to answer. The second thing I noticed was the cold, not the outside temperature, which was holding steady at -40-something, but the cold inside my cab. My heater was running full blast, same as always, but the warmth seemed thinner somehow, less substantial. I could feel drafts coming from places where there should not be any drafts. The corners of the windshield, the seams around the doors, little fingers of frozen air probing their way inside, testing the boundaries of my shelter. I checked all my seals and vents. Everything looked fine. The temperature gauge said the cab was at 68 degrees, same as always. But it did not feel like 68. It felt like something was slowly stealing the heat away, degree by degree, so gradually that you would not notice until it was too late. I shook off the feeling and focused on the road, probably just my imagination. Probably just the isolation and the darkness playing tricks on me. I had been driving for over 6 hours by then, and fatigue can do strange things to your mind. I told myself I would stop at the next pullout and stretch my legs, get some fresh air, reset my brain. That was when I saw the headlights in my mirror. At first, I was relieved. Another truck on the road meant I was not completely alone out here. I watched the lights grow larger as the vehicle gained on me, and I moved over slightly to give them room to pass. But the lights did not pass. They settled in behind me, maybe a quarter-mile back, and stayed there. I slowed down a little, thinking maybe they wanted to draft behind me for fuel efficiency. Some drivers do that on long hauls. But when I slowed, they slowed. When I sped up, they sped up, always maintaining that same distance, always those same twin points of light floating in the darkness behind me. I grabbed my radio and tried to raise them. Southbound truck behind me on the Dalton. This is Merrick in the blue Kenworth. You want to come on around me, or are you planning to follow me all the way to Fairbanks? I kept my tone light, joking. Just one driver talking to another. But there was no response. Just that empty hiss that seemed even flatter than before. Maybe their radio was out. It happens. I decided to pull over at the next wide spot and let them pass. There was a pullout coming up in about 2 miles, a place where the road widened enough for trucks to stop without blocking traffic. I put on my signal and started to slow down. The lights behind me went out. 1 second they were there, 2 bright points in my mirrors, and the next second they were gone. No gradual dimming, no turning away. Just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. I stared at my mirrors for a long moment, trying to understand what I was seeing. The road behind me was completely dark, empty, as if there had never been another truck there at all. I pulled into the pullout anyway and stopped. My hands were shaking slightly as I put the truck in park, and I told myself it was just the cold. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down from the cab, the frozen air hitting me like a physical blow. My breath came out in thick white clouds that hung in the air for a moment before dissipating. The silence was absolute. No wind, no engine noise from another vehicle, no sound at all except the ticking of my own truck as the engine cooled. I walked back along the road, shining my flashlight into the darkness. The beam seemed weak out here, swallowed up by the night almost immediately. I could see maybe 50 feet before the light just gave up and faded into nothing. The road behind me was empty. No tire tracks except my own. No sign that another vehicle had been there at all. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, feeling the cold seep through my layers, listening to the silence. The northern lights were still dancing overhead, but they seemed dimmer now, farther away. I had the sudden irrational feeling that I was being watched, that something out there in the darkness was looking back at me, waiting to see what I would do. I got back in my truck and sat there for a while with the engine running, trying to make sense of what had happened. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Fatigue hallucination. It was not unheard of on these long night runs. Your eyes play tricks. Your brain fills in patterns that are not there. I had probably seen a reflection from my own lights, or headlights from a truck on a parallel stretch of road, or something else that had a perfectly reasonable explanation. But I did not believe it. I had been driving too long to mistake a reflection for a real vehicle. Those lights had been following me, deliberately, and then they had vanished in a way that lights do not vanish. I thought about Joel Bracken. Joel was my regular convoy partner on the longer runs, a solid driver with 20 years on the haul roads. He was supposed to be running ahead of me that night, hauling a load of drilling equipment to the same facility in Coldfoot. We had planned to meet up at the Yukon River crossing and run the rest of the way together. Safety in numbers, especially in winter. But Joel had radioed me that afternoon to say he was running late. Mechanical trouble in Dead Horse. He would be a few hours behind me. I tried to raise him on the radio. "Joel, this is Rylan. You got your ears on, buddy?" Nothing. That same flat silence. I tried Marla Kinsey at dispatch, but she was not answering either. The radio was not broken. I could hear the static the empty carrier wave. But no one was responding. I sat there in my cab watching the northern lights pulse and shimmer above the frozen tundra, and I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. It was not just the isolation. I had been alone on the road plenty of times. This was something else. This was the feeling that the world I knew had somehow slipped away while I was not looking, and I was now in a place that looked the same but was not the same. A place where the rules were different. I checked my GPS unit. It was showing my position correctly, right there on the Dalton Highway about 30 miles north of the Yukon River. Everything looked normal on the screen. The route, the mile markers, the terrain. But the estimated time to Coldfoot was wrong. It should have said about 3 hours. Instead, it said 7 hours and 42 minutes. I stared at the screen, trying to understand. Maybe the system had recalculated based on traffic or road conditions. But there was no traffic out here, and the road conditions had not changed. I reset the unit and entered my destination again. This time, it said 4 hours and 15 minutes. I reset it again, 6 hours and 3 minutes. Each calculation different from the last, as if the distance to Coldfoot kept changing. I turned off the GPS and pulled back onto the road. I would navigate by mile markers like we used to do before all the electronic equipment. The Dalton Highway is well marked. You always know where you are if you pay attention to the signs. I did not need a satellite to tell me how to get to Coldfoot. I had driven this road hundreds of times. I could do it in my sleep. The next hour was quiet. No more phantom headlights. No more strange feelings. Just me and the road and the endless white landscape. I started to relax a little. Started to think that maybe I had been making something out of nothing. Stress and fatigue and too many hours alone in the dark. It happens to everybody eventually. Then the radio crackled to life. It was not a voice at first, just a sound, a kind of rhythmic pulsing that cut through the static, like someone tapping on a microphone. Tap, tap, tap. 3 beats, then silence. Then 3 more beats. I grabbed the handset and responded. "This is Merrick southbound on the Dalton. Who is trying to reach me?" The tapping stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but the hiss of the open channel. Then a voice. Faint and distorted, like it was coming from very far away or through some kind of interference. "Turn back." 2 words, that was all. A voice that could have been male or female, could have been young or old. Impossible to tell through the static and distortion. But the words were clear enough. "Turn back." I keyed the microphone. "Say again, who is this?" "What do you mean, turn back?" The same voice, same flat tone. "Turn back, turn back, turn back." It kept repeating over and over those 2 words on a loop. Like a recording, like a warning signal set to play automatically whenever someone reached a certain frequency. I switched to a different channel, but the voice followed me. "Turn back, turn back." I switched again, and it was there on every channel, filling the cab with that monotonous repetition. I turned off the radio. The silence that followed was almost worse. At least with the voice, there was something. Some presence, even if it was hostile or threatening. Now there was nothing, just me and the road and the darkness, and that feeling again. That feeling of being watched from somewhere I could not see. I drove faster. I knew it was dangerous to push the speed on a road like this, especially at night, especially alone. But I wanted to get to Coldfoot. I wanted to be around other people, other drivers. anyone who could tell me that the world was still normal and I was just losing my mind. I wanted to hear Joel's voice on the radio, giving me grief about something or other the way he always did. I wanted Marla to tell me that dispatch had received my check-in and everything was fine. The mile markers slid past. 2:20, 2:15, 2:10. I was making good time. At this rate, I would reach the Yukon crossing in about 40 minutes, then another 2 hours to Coldfoot. I could do this. I just had to keep driving and not think about headlights that vanished, or voices that repeated the same 2 words, or GPS units that could not calculate a simple distance. At mile marker 2:05, I saw something that made me hit the brakes. There was a figure standing on the side of the road. It was just visible at the edge of my headlights, a dark shape against the white snow. Human-shaped, standing perfectly still, facing my truck. I slowed down as I approached, trying to see more clearly. Out here, a person on foot could mean a breakdown, an accident, someone in serious trouble. You do not just drive past. No matter what kind of strange night you are having, you stop and check. But as I got closer, I realized something was wrong. The figure was not moving, not waving me down, not walking toward me, not doing any of the things that a stranded person would do when they saw a truck approaching. Just standing there. Watching. I stopped the truck about 50 yards away and hit my high beams. The figure was still there, still motionless. I could see now that it was wearing dark clothing, a heavy coat and pants that blended into the shadows. But I could not see a face. The head was there, the shape of it, but the features were somehow obscured, hidden, like there was nothing there to see. I sat in my truck for a long moment, staring at that shape in my headlights. Every instinct told me not to get out. Every instinct told me to put the truck in gear and drive past as fast as I could. But what if it was someone who needed help? What if I was so spooked by everything else that had happened that I was going to let someone freeze to death on the side of the road? I grabbed my radio and tried one more time. This is Merrick southbound at mile marker 2:05. There is someone on the road here. If anybody can hear me, please respond. Nothing. I looked at the figure again. It had not moved, had not made any gesture or signal, just standing there watching me with whatever it had instead of a face. I made a decision. I put the truck in gear and started to drive toward it, slowly, ready to stop if it stepped into my path. As I got closer, the figure remained perfectly still. I was maybe 20 yards away when I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. There were no footprints in the snow around it. The shoulder of the road was covered in fresh powder, undisturbed except for the tracks from my own tires. But around the figure, the snow was smooth and unbroken, as if it had not walked there at all, as if it had simply appeared, materializing out of the frozen air like a thought made solid. I did not stop. I pressed the accelerator and drove past, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. In my mirrors, I could see the figure turning to watch me go, that blank head rotating to follow my truck as I pulled away. I did not look back again. I kept my eyes on the road and drove. The mile markers kept coming. 200, 195, 190. I was getting closer to the Yukon crossing, closer to other people, other trucks, some kind of normalcy. I told myself I would be okay once I got there. Whatever was happening on this stretch of road, it would end once I reached the crossing. Things like this do not happen in places where other people can see. But even as I thought it, I knew it was not true. Whatever was out here with me tonight, it was not going to let me go that easily. I could feel it in the cold that kept seeping into my cab despite the heater. I could feel it in the silence on the radio. I could feel it in the way the darkness seemed to press against my windows, thick and heavy, like something trying to get in. And somewhere behind me, at the very edge of my mirrors, I thought I could see headlights again. Following. The headlights stayed with me for the next 20 miles. They never got closer and never fell back. Always that same distance, maybe a quarter mile, floating in my mirrors like two pale eyes. I tried everything. I sped up to 70, which is dangerous on the Dalton in good conditions and borderline suicidal on a frozen night like this. The lights matched my speed. I slowed to a crawl, hoping they would pass. They slowed too. I pulled over twice, sat with my engine idling, and my flashlight pointing out the rear window. Both times, the lights stopped when I stopped and started when I started. But they never came close enough for me to see what kind of vehicle they belonged to. The third time I pulled over, I got out of the truck. I do not know what I was thinking. Maybe I was not thinking at all. Maybe I had just reached the point where not knowing was worse than any possible answer. I grabbed my flashlight and a tire iron from behind the seat and walked back along the road, my boots crunching on the frozen gravel. The cold was savage, worse than before. My face went numb within seconds. My eyes watered and the tears froze on my cheeks. But I kept walking, pointing my flashlight at those distant headlights, trying to see past them to whatever was behind. I walked maybe 200 yards. The headlights did not move. They just sat there, burning in the darkness, watching me approach. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. My breath was coming in ragged gasps that crystallized in the air around me. I was scared, more scared than I had ever been in my life. But I was also angry. Angry at whatever was playing this game with me. Angry at my own fear. When I was about 100 yards from the lights, they went out, just like before. 1 second there, the next second gone. I stood in the middle of the road, flashlight shaking in my hand, staring at the empty darkness where the lights had been. Nothing. No engine sound, no movement, no tire tracks in the snow, just the night and the cold and the silence pressing in from all sides. I ran back to my truck. I am not ashamed to admit it. I ran like a frightened child, my lungs burning from the frozen air, my legs clumsy in my heavy gear. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors and sat there shaking for a long time before I trusted myself to drive again. The Yukon River crossing was supposed to be 15 miles ahead. I had been watching the mile markers carefully, counting them down. 185, 180, 175. But when I looked at my odometer, the numbers did not make sense. According to my calculations, I should have reached the crossing by now. I should have seen the bridge, the buildings, the lights of the maintenance station. Instead, there was just more road, more darkness, more empty tundra stretching away under the dancing northern lights. I checked my GPS again. The screen was flickering now, the display jumping between different views like it could not decide what to show me. For a moment, I saw my position clearly, right there on the highway about 5 miles north of the crossing. Then the screen scrambled into static. Then it showed me somewhere else entirely, a location in the Brooks Range that was at least 50 miles from where I should have been. Then static again, then my correct position. Then nothing. I turned it off and drove by instinct. I knew this road. I had driven it so many times that I could feel the curves and grades in my bones. The crossing had to be close. It had to be. The radio came back on by itself. I had not touched it. I had left it off after that voice started repeating. But suddenly it was on again, volume turned up high, filling the cab with static and fragments of sound. I reached for the knob to turn it off, but then I heard something that made me stop. Rylan, my name, spoken clearly through the static. A voice I almost recognized. Rylan, this is Joel. Do you copy? Joel, my convoy partner, the man who was supposed to be running behind me tonight. I grabbed the handset so fast I almost dropped it. Joel, I read you. Where are you, buddy? I have been trying to raise you for hours. Static. Long seconds of nothing. then his voice again, but different this time. Distorted, like it was being filtered through something that did not quite understand how human speech worked. "I am behind you, Rylan. I have been behind you the whole time." My blood went cold. I looked in my mirrors, but the road behind me was dark. No headlights. No sign of another vehicle. "Joel, I do not see you. What is your position?" "Right behind you." His voice was flat now, emotionless. "I have been following you since Dead Horse. Why did you not stop when I flashed my lights?" "I did stop," I said. "I stopped 3 times. There was no one there. I was there, Rylan. I am always there. Why will you not look at me?" The hairs on my arms were standing up. This was not Joel. Whatever was speaking through that radio, using that voice, it was not my friend. Joel had a wife and 2 kids in Fairbanks. Joel told terrible jokes and complained about his back, and always identified himself properly on the radio. He would never talk like this, never sound like this. "Who is this?" I said. "This is not Joel. Who am I talking to?" Silence. Then a sound that might have been laughter, but it was wrong. Too high-pitched, too long. Not a sound that a human throat would make. "You should have turned back, Rylan." The voice was different now, deeper, older. That same voice that had been repeating those 2 words. "Now it is too late." The radio went dead. Not just silent, but dead. The power light off, the display blank. I tried the switch, tried changing channels, tried everything. Nothing worked. The radio was gone. I drove faster. The landscape was changing. I had not noticed it at first, too focused on the road and the radio and the headlights that kept appearing and disappearing. But now I could see that the terrain was not right. The Dalton Highway runs through river valleys and mountain passes, with specific landmarks at specific locations. I knew them all. The gentle curves near the Chandelar Shelf. The steep grades on the south side of Atigan Pass. The long, straight stretch approaching the Yukon. But the road I was on now did not match any of those landmarks. The curves came in the wrong places. The grades were too steep or too shallow. The terrain on either side was unfamiliar. Rock formations and frozen rivers that I had never seen before in 11 years of driving this route. I told myself it was just the darkness, just the disorientation of driving alone at night with no radio and no GPS and nothing but my own headlights to show me the way. But I did not believe it. I knew this road. I knew it like I knew my own name. And this was not it. The snow started about 20 minutes later. It came out of nowhere. One moment the sky was clear, the northern lights still visible overhead. The next moment the air was thick with white, flakes so dense I could barely see the hood of my own truck. I slowed to a crawl, my headlights reflecting off the wall of snow in front of me. Visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet, then 5, then nothing at all. I had been through whiteouts before. They are a fact of life on the Dalton, especially in winter. You slow down, you stay calm, you keep your wheels on the road and wait for it to pass. But this was different. This snow was not behaving like normal snow. It was not falling from above so much as appearing all around me, materializing out of the air itself. And it was not cold. Or rather, it was cold, but it felt wrong, artificial, like the cold from an open freezer rather than the cold of a natural storm. I stopped the truck. There was no point in driving when I could not see the road. I would wait it out, let the storm pass, then continue to the crossing. It could not be far now. It could not be. The silence in the cab was total. With the radio dead and the engine idling low, there was nothing to hear but my own breathing and the soft hiss of snow against the windshield. I sat there in that cocoon of white, feeling very small and very alone. Feeling like the rest of the world had disappeared, and left me here in this one small pocket of existence, cut off from everything I knew. That was when I heard the knocking. 3 sharp raps against the driver's side door, like someone standing outside, asking to be let in. I jumped so hard I hit my head on the roof of the cab. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking. I looked at the door, but the window was completely covered with snow. I could not see anything outside, could not tell if there was really someone there, or if the sound had come from somewhere else, the engine, the frame, something shifting in the cold. 3 more raps, louder this time, more insistent. "Who is there?" I called out. My voice sounded strange in the silence of the cab, thin and weak. "Hello? Who is out there?" No answer, just the snow and the silence and the feeling of something waiting on the other side of the door. I thought about the figure I had seen earlier, standing on the side of the road with no footprints around it, standing there in the cold with nothing where its face should be. If that thing was outside my door right now, if it was trying to get in. The knocking came again, but this time it was not on the door. It was on the windshield, right in front of me, right where my face would be if the glass was not there. Rap, rap, rap. I could see the snow moving with each impact, something pressing against the windshield from outside, hard enough to shake the glass in its frame. I shrank back in my seat, pressing myself against the far side of the cab, as far from the windshield as I could get. My hand found the tire iron on the passenger seat and I gripped it tight, knowing it would be useless against whatever was out there, but needing to hold something solid anyway. The knocking stopped. I sat there for a long time, barely breathing, waiting for it to start again. But there was nothing, just the snow and the silence. Whatever had been outside my truck, whatever had been trying to get my attention, it had gone away. Or it was waiting. After maybe 15 minutes, the snow began to thin. The wall of white in front of my windshield slowly became translucent, then transparent. I could see shapes emerging from the storm, the road, the shoulder, the tundra beyond. Everything covered in fresh powder, smooth and unbroken. I looked around for tracks, footprints, any sign that something had been standing outside my truck. But there was nothing. The snow around my vehicle was pristine, undisturbed, just like the snow around that figure on the road, just like there had been nothing there at all. I did not believe it. I had heard those knocks. I had felt the windshield shake. Something had been out there, something real and solid. But the snow told a different story. The snow said I was alone. I put the truck in gear and started driving again. The storm had passed as quickly as it had come, and the sky was clear once more. The northern lights were back, dancing and shimmering, but they looked different now. Redder, angrier, like something had disturbed them, stirred them up from their usual gentle movements into something more violent. The mile markers started appearing again. 165, 160, 155. I was getting closer to the crossing. I had to be. The numbers did not lie. I just had to keep driving and trust the road to take me where I needed to go. At mile marker 150, I saw the other truck. It was parked on the shoulder facing south, hazard lights blinking. A big blue Kenworth, same model as mine, same color, even the same company logo on the door. I slowed down as I approached, trying to see inside the cab. Maybe it was Joel. Maybe he had gotten ahead of me somehow and broken down. Maybe this whole nightmare was about to end with a simple explanation and a story we would tell other drivers for years. But as I pulled alongside the other truck, I saw that the cab was empty. The door was hanging open, the interior light on, but there was no one inside. No driver, no passenger. Just an empty seat and a coffee cup sitting on the dashboard. Steam still rising from the liquid inside. I stopped my truck and sat there for a moment, looking at that other Kenworth, looking at the coffee cup. Whoever had been driving that truck had left very recently. So recently that their coffee was still warm. But where had they gone? There was nothing out here. No buildings, no shelter, no reason for anyone to step away from their vehicle. And in this cold, no one would leave their door hanging open, not for any reason. Not unless they had no choice. I should have driven on. I knew that. Every instinct told me to put my foot on the gas and get away from that empty truck with its open door and its steaming coffee, and its complete absence of any explanation. But I could not. I had to know. I had to understand what was happening on this road tonight. I climbed down from my cab and walked toward the other truck. The cold bit into me immediately, needles of ice piercing through my gear. My breath came out in thick white clouds. My boots crunched on the frozen snow. As I got closer, I could see more details. The truck was identical to mine in every way. Same year, same model, same configuration. Even the same scratches and dents that I had accumulated over years of driving these rough roads. I looked at the door, at the company logo painted there. Polar Express Logistics, my company. And below the logo, the truck number and the driver name. Merrick, my name. On a truck that was not mine. On a truck that was sitting empty on the side of the road with its door hanging open and its coffee still warm. I stood there in the cold, staring at that name, trying to make sense of it, trying to find some explanation that did not involve the impossible. A mistake, a coincidence, another driver with the same name. But even as I thought these things, I knew they were not true. This was not another driver. This was not a mistake. This was my truck. Somehow, impossibly, this was my truck sitting here on the side of the road. Which meant, I looked at my own truck, still idling a few yards away. Looked at the door, at the logo, at the name painted there. Merrick, the same. Both trucks the same. Both names the same. As if I had somehow split in two, and one version of me had kept driving, while another version had stopped here and walked away into the frozen night. Or, as if something else had copied my truck. Made a duplicate. A lure. I backed away from the empty Kenworth, my eyes scanning the darkness around me. Looking for movement. Looking for the driver who should have been there. Looking for whatever had made this copy and set it here for me to find. That was when I saw the footprints. They led away from the open door, across the shoulder, and out into the tundra. A single set of tracks, crisp and clear in the fresh snow. Human footprints, boot treads that looked exactly like the ones I was wearing. They went straight out from the truck, maybe 50 yards, and then they stopped. Just stopped. As if whoever had made them had walked out into the empty tundra and then vanished. Ceased to exist, been taken. I followed the tracks with my eyes, out to that point where they ended. The snow there was undisturbed, no sign of a struggle, no sign of anything at all. Just the footprints and then nothing. I ran back to my truck. I did not walk, I did not look back. I ran as fast as I could in my heavy gear, my breath tearing at my lungs, my legs burning. I climbed into the cab and slammed the door and locked it and put the truck in gear and drove. I did not look at the other Kenworth as I passed it. I did not want to see it again. I did not want to think about what it meant. The mile markers counted down. 145, 140, 135. I was flying now, driving faster than I should, faster than was safe. But I did not care. I needed to get to the crossing. I needed to find other people, other trucks, some proof that the world still existed beyond this nightmare stretch of road. At mile marker 130, the radio came back on. I had not touched it. The power light was still off, the display still blank. But sound was coming from the speakers. That same rhythmic tapping, that same signal, tap, 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 and then the voice. You found it, Rylan. the flat, inhuman tone, the words that were not quite words. You found what we left for you. Now you understand. Now you know what happens to drivers who do not turn back. I grabbed the handset and screamed into it. Who are you? What do you want from me? What is happening on this road? Silence. Then that sound that might have been laughter. The road takes what it needs, Rylan. It has taken so many. Drivers who came this way and never left. Drivers who are still here, still driving, still looking for the crossing that they will never reach. You could have turned back. You could have listened. But you did not. And now you are ours. The radio died again. Dead. Silent. Cold. I looked at the road ahead of me, at the endless darkness stretching out beyond my headlights. Looked at the mile markers counting down toward a destination that seemed to get farther away the closer I got. Looked at my mirrors, at the empty road behind me. Empty. No headlights. Not anymore. And somehow, that was the most frightening thing of all. I drove for another hour without seeing another vehicle. The mile markers kept counting down, but they had stopped making sense. 125, 120, 115. According to those numbers, I should have crossed the Yukon River 40 miles ago. I should have been well past Coldfoot by now, climbing toward Adigun Pass, leaving this nightmare behind. But the crossing never came. The bridge never appeared. Just more road, more darkness, more frozen tundra stretching away into nothing. I had stopped checking my odometer. The numbers there did not match the mile markers, and they did not match my own sense of how far I had traveled. Time had become slippery, too. My dashboard clock said it was just past 3 in the morning, but it felt like I had been driving for days, weeks, like the night had stretched itself out around me and refused to end. The cold was getting worse. My heater was still running full blast, the fan on high, the temperature gauge showing 68 degrees. But the cab felt like an icebox. I could see my breath now, faint white clouds forming in front of my face. Frost was creeping across the inside of the windshield, delicate patterns of ice that spread a little further every time I looked. I scraped at them with my glove, but they came back within minutes. The cold was inside the truck now. Inside with me. I tried to think clearly, tried to figure out what to do. I could not go back. Whatever was behind me was worse than whatever was ahead. I could not stop. If I stopped, I would freeze. The only option was to keep driving, keep moving, and hope that eventually I would reach somewhere. Anywhere. Someplace that made sense. The fuel gauge was dropping faster than it should. I had filled up in Dead Horse before I left, topped off both tanks. That should have given me enough diesel to reach Fairbanks with plenty to spare. But the needle was already below half, dropping toward the quarter mark. I was burning fuel at an impossible rate, as if the engine was working harder than it should be, as if something was draining the tanks from outside. I thought about Joel again. Real Joel, not the thing that had spoken to me through the radio. He should have been behind me somewhere, running the same route, hauling his load to the same destination. If I had kept my speed normal, instead of racing through the night, he might have caught up to me. We might have been running together right now, watching each other's taillights, keeping each other company through the darkness. But I had driven too fast, and he had started too late. And now I was alone out here with whatever was playing these games. The northern lights had changed again. They were no longer dancing. They were pulsing, slow, rhythmic waves of red and green that rolled across the sky like a heartbeat. I had never seen them move like that before. Never seen colors that deep and saturated, that seemed to glow with their own internal light. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, and I could not stop looking at them even though I knew I should be watching the road. That was when I noticed the other lights. They were not headlights. They were smaller, fainter, scattered across the tundra on both sides of the road. At first I thought they were reflections, my own lights bouncing off ice or snow. But they were the wrong color, pale blue, almost white, hovering just above the ground. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, spread out across the frozen landscape like stars that had fallen from the sky and gotten stuck. I slowed down, trying to understand what I was seeing. The lights were not moving. Not exactly. They were pulsing in the same rhythm as the northern lights overhead, brightening and fading in slow waves. They seemed to be arranged in patterns, clusters and lines that might have been random or might have been deliberate. I could not tell. I could not make sense of any of it. I stopped the truck. I do not know why. I had promised myself I would not stop again. Not after the other Kenworth. Not after the footprints that led nowhere. But something about those lights made me need to look closer. Made me need to understand. I sat in my cab and stared out at the tundra. The lights were everywhere now, covering the landscape as far as I could see. They were not reflections. They were not natural. They were something else, something that should not exist, and they were surrounding me. One of them started moving. It rose up from the ground, slowly, drifting toward the road. Toward my truck. It was maybe the size of a softball, pale blue and glowing, and it moved with a kind of purpose that made my skin crawl, like it knew where it was going, like it was coming for me specifically. I watched it approach, watched it float across the shoulder and come to rest right outside my driver's side window. It hovered there, pulsing gently, and I had the sudden overwhelming feeling that it was looking at me, that there was something inside that light, some intelligence, some awareness, that it wanted something from me. I pressed myself back against the passenger side of the cab as far from that light as I could get. My hand found the tire iron again. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The light just hovered there, patient, waiting. The cold in the cab got worse. I could feel it now, a physical presence, pressing against my skin, seeping into my bones. Then the light moved again. It drifted forward toward the windshield and passed through. I do not mean it broke the glass. I mean it passed through, like the windshield was not there at all. One moment it was outside, and the next moment it was inside, hovering in the air in front of me. I could feel the cold coming off it. A deep, aching cold that made the Arctic night seem warm by comparison. I could feel something else, too. A pressure in my head. A presence. Something trying to get inside my mind the way it had gotten inside my truck. I swung the tire iron. I do not know what I expected to happen. You cannot hit light. You cannot hurt something that has no substance. But I swung anyway, a wild, desperate swing, and the iron passed through the light and hit the dashboard with a crack that echoed through the cab. The light flickered, wavered. Then it drifted backward, through the windshield again, and rejoined the others outside. For a long moment, nothing happened. The lights just hung there, hovering over the tundra, pulsing in their slow rhythm. Then, all at once, they went out. Darkness. Complete and total. The northern lights were gone too, leaving the sky black and empty. My headlights were the only illumination, two weak beams cutting through the night, showing me the road ahead and nothing else. The cold in the cab began to ease, slowly, degree by degree. The frost on the windshield started to melt. I sat there for a long time, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. The light had come inside my truck. It had been in here with me, and it had tried to do something, tried to get into my head, tried to make contact or take control or I do not know what. If I had not swung at it, if I had just sat there and let it, I did not want to think about that. I put the truck in gear and started driving again. The road ahead was dark and empty. The tundra on either side was dark and empty. Everything was dark and empty, and I was the only thing moving through this frozen void, this place that was not quite the world I knew. The radio came on again. I flinched when I heard the static, my hands jerking on the wheel. But this time it was not the flat voice or the tapping signal. This time it was something else, something that made me lean forward and turn up the volume even though every instinct told me not to. It was music, old music, country music from decades ago, scratchy and faint like it was being broadcast from very far away. I recognized the song. It was one my father used to play when I was a kid, a Hank Williams tune about loneliness and the open road. I sat there listening to it, this ghost of a song drifting through the static, and for a moment I almost felt okay, almost felt like things might be normal again. Then the song stopped mid-verse and the voice came back. Rylan Merrick, southbound on the Dalton Highway, November 17th. Do you know what day it is, Rylan? I grabbed the handset. What do you mean what day it is? It is November 17th. I left Dead Horse 6 hours ago. Silence. Then that sound that was almost laughter. 6 hours. Is that what you think? Is that what your clock tells you? I looked at the dashboard. The clock still said 3:15. The same time it had said when I looked at it half an hour ago. The same time it had said when I looked at it an hour before that. The numbers were not changing. The clock had stopped. How long? I said into the handset. How long have I been out here? Long enough. The voice was different now, softer, almost sad. Long enough that they have stopped looking for you. Long enough that your name is on the list with all the others. All the drivers who came this way and never reached the other side. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Colder than the Arctic air. Colder than the light that had tried to get inside my head. A cold that came from understanding, from knowing. Joel, I said, is Joel on that list? Joel turned back. The voice was flat again, emotionless. Joel listened. Joel is home with his family right now, wondering what happened to you. Wondering why you did not listen when he tried to warn you. Joel never warned me. Joel never said anything about turning back. No, but we did. We warned you, and you did not listen. None of you ever listen. You think the road belongs to you. You think you can drive through any night and reach the other side. But the road does not belong to you, Rylan. You belong to the road. The radio went silent. I drove on. I did not know what else to do. The mile markers had stopped appearing. The road just went on, straight and flat and endless. I could not see any landmarks, any signs, anything that would tell me where I was or how far I had to go. Just the road and the darkness and my headlights pushing back the night. The fuel gauge was almost on empty now. I had maybe 20 miles left, maybe less. When the diesel ran out, the engine would die. The heater would stop. The cold would come inside for real. Not the creeping cold that had been testing my defenses, but the killing cold. The cold that would freeze me solid in my cab and leave me there for whoever found me. If anyone ever found me. I thought about my wife. We had been married for 8 years. She knew the risks of this job. She knew that every time I left for a run, there was a chance I would not come back. But she had never asked me to quit. She understood that this was who I was, that driving was in my blood, that I needed the road the way other men needed air or water. She just asked me to be careful, to come home safe. I was not going to come home safe. I knew that now. Whatever was happening on this road tonight, it was not going to let me go. It had taken too many others. It was not going to make an exception for me. The engine coughed. I looked at the fuel gauge. The needle was below the red line now. down in the zone where the tanks were supposed to be empty. But the engine kept running, coughing and sputtering, fighting to stay alive. I nursed the throttle, trying to coax every last drop of diesel through the injectors, trying to make it just a little farther. A light appeared ahead, not the pale blue lights from the tundra. This was different. Yellow. Warm. The kind of light that comes from buildings and windows and places where people live. I sat up straighter, hardly daring to believe it. A light meant a town, a station, a shelter. A light meant other people. A light meant I was not alone. The engine coughed again, harder this time, and the truck began to slow. I pressed the accelerator, but there was nothing left to give. The diesel was gone. The engine was running on fumes and faith, and neither of those would last much longer. The light was getting closer. I could see the shape of a building now, a low structure with windows and a door and smoke rising from a chimney. A roadhouse. One of the old roadhouses that used to be scattered along the Dalton before most of them closed down. I had heard stories about them, these relics from the pipeline days, but I had never seen one still operating. Never even knew any were left. The engine died when I was maybe 100 yards from the building. The truck rolled to a stop, silent, dark. The heater fan wound down and stopped. The cold began to come in immediately, fingers of ice reaching through every crack and seam. I had minutes, maybe less, before the cab became a freezer. I grabbed my coat and my flashlight and climbed down from the truck. The cold hit me like a wall, so intense it took my breath away. I could feel my skin tightening, my lungs burning. The roadhouse was 100 yards away. I just had to make it 100 yards. I started walking, running. My legs were stiff from hours in the cab, and my gear was heavy, and the cold was doing everything it could to stop me. But the light was there, warm and yellow and real, and I kept my eyes on it and did not look back. The door of the roadhouse opened when I was maybe 20 feet away. A figure stood there, backlit by the glow from inside. I could not see features, could not tell if it was a man or a woman, just a shape, waiting, watching me approach. I reached the door and pushed past the figure, into the warmth, into the light. I stood there gasping, shaking, feeling the heat soak into my frozen body, feeling like I had been saved, like I had made it, like the nightmare was finally over. Then I turned around and looked at the figure who had opened the door, and the nightmare got worse. The man standing in the doorway was wearing my face. Not a similar face, not a family resemblance. My face. The same eyes, the same jaw, the same scar above the left eyebrow, where I had cut myself on a truck mirror 15 years ago. He was wearing the same clothes I was wearing, the same coat, the same boots. He was looking at me with an expression I had seen in my own mirror 1,000 times. That mixture of exhaustion and weariness that comes from too many hours on the road. I stumbled backward, away from him, and hit a table behind me. The impact knocked over a coffee cup and I heard it shatter on the floor, but I did not look down. I could not take my eyes off the thing that looked like me. It smiled, my smile. The crooked one that my wife always said made me look like I was getting away with something. "You made it," it said, my voice. Exactly my voice, down to the slight rasp I get when I have been talking too long or breathing too much cold air. "We were not sure you would. Most of them do not make it this far." I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My throat was frozen. My whole body was frozen, and not from the cold. The thing that looked like me stepped closer. I could see now that it was not perfect. The details were right, but there was something wrong with the way they fit together. The proportions were slightly off. The movements were too smooth, too fluid, like something that had learned to imitate a human being but did not quite understand how the pieces were supposed to work. "You have questions," it said. "They always have questions. But the questions do not matter. The answers do not matter. The only thing that matters is that you are here now, with us. I found my voice. What are you? It tilted its head, that gesture I make when I am thinking about something. We are what the road makes. We are the drivers who did not turn back. We are the ones who kept going when we should have stopped, who pushed through when we should have listened. We are you, Rylan. Or we will be. I looked around the roadhouse for the first time. It was old, run down, the kind of place that had not seen maintenance in decades. The furniture was covered in dust. The windows were dark and grimy. There were other people sitting at tables and standing along the walls, and every single one of them was looking at me. Men and women of different ages, different builds, different faces. But they all had that same wrongness, that same sense of pieces that did not quite fit. And on the wall behind the bar, there were photographs. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, pinned up in overlapping layers. Photographs of trucks. Kenworths and Peterbilts and Freightliners, old models and new models, all of them parked on the side of a road that looked like the Dalton Highway. And in front of each truck, a driver, posing, smiling, looking at the camera like they had just finished a successful run and wanted to commemorate the moment. I recognized some of the faces from missing persons reports. Drivers who had disappeared on the haul roads over the years. Drivers whose trucks had been found empty and abandoned, whose families had never learned what happened to them. They were all here, all on that wall, all smiling at the camera like nothing was wrong. You will be on the wall too, the thing with my face said. Everyone ends up on the wall eventually. It is not so bad. You get used to it. You forget what it was like before. You forget that you ever wanted anything else. No. I backed towards the door, my hands out in front of me like that could stop them if they decided to rush me. I am not staying here. I am getting back in my truck, and I am driving out of here, and I am going home. Your truck is empty. No fuel, and even if it was not, it would not matter. You cannot drive out of here, Rylan. No one drives out. The only way out is to walk, and no one survives the walk. The cold takes them. It always takes them. The other figures in the roadhouse were moving now, drifting closer, surrounding me. I could see their faces more clearly, and the wrongness was more obvious up close. Skin that was too smooth. Eyes that did not blink. Mouths that smiled but did not quite match the expressions above them. They were copies. Imitations. Things that wore human faces but were not human anymore. I hit the door with my back and grabbed the handle. The thing with my face shook its head. You will die out there. The cold is -50 tonight and your truck is dead. You would not make it a mile. Stay here. Stay with us. It is warm here. It is safe. Safe. I looked at those faces, those wrong smiling faces, and I thought about what it would mean to stay, to become one of them, to forget my wife, my life, everything I had been before I took this run, to end up on that wall with all the others smiling at a camera, frozen in a moment that would last forever. I opened the door. The cold hit me like a physical assault, so intense that I gasped and felt the air freeze in my lungs. The thing with my face called out behind me, words I could not understand over the roar of blood in my ears. I did not look back. I stepped out into the night and pulled the door shut and started walking. My truck was a dark shape on the road ahead of me, dead and silent. I walked past it without stopping. There was nothing for me there. The fuel was gone, and even if it was not, I was not sure I trusted anything about that truck anymore. I was not sure it was really my truck. I was not sure anything was really what it appeared to be out here. The cold was killing me. I could feel it happening, feel my body shutting down piece by piece. My fingers went first, then my toes, then my hands and feet. The shivering stopped after a few minutes, and I knew that was bad. Knew it meant my core temperature was dropping too far, but I kept walking. The road stretched out ahead of me, empty and dark, and I followed it because it was the only thing left to follow. I do not know how long I walked. Time had stopped meaning anything. The darkness was absolute. No stars, no northern lights, nothing but the black sky and the white snow and the gray line of the road cutting through it. I could not feel my legs anymore, but they kept moving, one step after another, carrying me forward through the frozen night. I thought about Joel, real Joel, back in Fairbanks with his wife and kids, wondering what had happened to me. I hoped he would not come looking. I hoped he would stay home where it was safe and never drive this stretch of road at night again. I hoped he would remember that I had not listened, that I had not turned back, and that he would learn from my mistake. I thought about Marla at dispatch, filing the paperwork that would list me as missing. Another driver who went out and did not come back. Another name on the list of the lost. Another family left wondering. I thought about my wife. I thought about the way she looked in the morning when she was still half asleep. I thought about her voice on the phone when I called from the road, the way she always sounded happy to hear from me even when I woke her up at strange hours. I thought about all the things I should have said to her and never did, all the moments I should have appreciated and let slip past. I was going to die out here, I knew that. The cold was too deep, and I was too far from anywhere. But I kept walking because the alternative was to go back to that roadhouse and become one of those things with the wrong faces and the empty smiles. At least this way I would die as myself. At least this way I would not end up on that wall. The lights appeared when I was about to give up. Not the pale blue lights from the tundra. Not the yellow glow of the roadhouse. These were different. Brighter. Moving. Headlights coming toward me from the south. I stopped in the middle of the road and watched them approach. Part of me thought it was another trick, another lure like the truck that had been a copy of mine. But part of me was too tired and too cold to care anymore. If it was a trick, then it was a trick. At least it would be over. The truck stopped in front of me. A big Peterbilt, red and chrome, with running lights blazing and a CB antenna on the roof. Real. Solid. The most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The driver's door opened and a man climbed down. He was big, broad-shouldered, with a gray beard and a weathered face. He looked at me standing there in the road, and his expression went from surprised to concerned to something like fear. "Jesus Christ," he said. "How long have you been out here? You look half dead." I tried to answer, but my mouth would not work. The cold had gone too deep. I could not feel anything anymore, could not make my body do what I wanted it to do. The man grabbed me and half carried me to his truck, boosting me up into the cab. The heat inside was overwhelming, painful, like being stabbed with 1,000 needles as my frozen skin started to come back to life. I sat there shaking and gasping while the driver got back behind the wheel and put the truck in gear. "I'm taking you to Coldfoot," he said. "There's a medical station there. We need to get you looked at. What happened to your truck?" I tried to tell him, tried to explain about the lights and the radio and the roadhouse with the wrong people, but the words would not come out right. They kept getting tangled up, mixed together, and I could see from his expression that I was not making any sense. "It is okay," he said. "Just rest. We will get you sorted out at Coldfoot." I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. The heat was soaking into me, pushing out the cold, bringing me back to life. I could feel my fingers again, my toes, the parts of me that I had thought were gone for good. I was going to survive. Somehow, impossibly, I was going to survive. I opened my eyes and looked at the driver. The dashboard lights were casting his face in green and red shadows, making him look strange, unfamiliar. I studied his profile, his hands on the wheel, the way he held himself in the seat. He looked normal. He looked human. But so had the thing in the roadhouse at first. So had all of them, until you got close enough to see the wrongness. "What is your name?" I asked. My voice was a croak, barely audible. He glanced at me. "Garrison," he said. "Pete Garrison. I run freight out of Fairbanks, same as you from the look of your rig back there. That was yours, right? The blue Kenworth." I nodded. "Passed it about 3 miles back. Looked like you ran out of fuel. Bad luck, running dry out here in the middle of nowhere. You are lucky I came along when I did." I kept looking at him, kept watching for the signs, the too smooth skin, the eyes that did not blink, the smile that did not match the rest of the face. But I did not see any of that. He just looked like a driver, a normal, tired, middle-aged driver doing his job on a cold night. "How far to Coldfoot?" I asked. "About 40 miles. Hour and a half maybe, depending on conditions. You just rest. I will get you there." I settled back in the seat and watched the road through the windshield. The headlights cut through the darkness, showing me the same empty highway I had been driving all night. The same frozen tundra. The same black sky. But it felt different now. It felt normal. Like I had crossed back over from wherever I had been into the world I knew. The mile markers started appearing again. 95, 90, 85. Counting down toward Coldfoot, toward safety, toward the end of this nightmare. I watched them pass and I let myself believe that it was really over. That I had made it. That I was going home. We reached Coldfoot just as the sky was starting to lighten in the east. The little cluster of buildings appeared around a bend in the road, lights glowing in the windows, smoke rising from chimneys. Real buildings, real people. I had never been so happy to see a truck stop in my life. Garrison pulled into the parking area and helped me down from the cab. There were other trucks there, other drivers moving around, the ordinary bustle of a highway rest stop in the early morning. I stood there in the cold and breathed it in, this beautiful mundane reality that I had thought I would never see again. "Medical station is over there," Garrison said, pointing to a small building at the edge of the lot. "Get yourself checked out. That was a close call you had tonight." I thanked him. I tried to find words for what he had done, for what it meant that he had come along when he did, but nothing seemed adequate. He just nodded like it was nothing, like any driver would have done the same thing and climbed back into his truck. I watched him pull out of the lot and head north toward Dead Horse, toward the road I had just escaped. His taillights dwindled in the distance and then disappeared around a curve, and he was gone. The medical station patched me up. Mild frostbite on my fingers and toes, some hypothermia, nothing permanent. They asked me what had happened, and I told them I had run out of fuel and had to walk. I did not tell them about the lights or the radio or the roadhouse. I did not tell them about the thing that had worn my face. They would have thought I was crazy. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe the whole night had been a hallucination brought on by cold and exhaustion and too many hours alone in the dark. I called my wife from the station phone. She cried when she heard my voice. She had been worried when I did not check in, had been calling dispatch every hour looking for updates. I told her I was okay. I told her I loved her. I told her I would be home soon. Then I called Marla at dispatch to report what had happened. She was relieved that I was safe, but she was also confused. "Your truck is at Coldfoot," she said. "It arrived about 2 hours ago. One of our other drivers brought it in. Said he found it on the side of the road with the engine running and no one inside. Figured you had caught a ride with someone and he should not leave it out there." I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the weather. "What driver?" I said. "Who brought it in?" She checked her records. "Pete Garrison. He runs the Dead Horse route, same as you. Said he tried to raise you on the radio but did not get any answer, so he just drove your truck to Coldfoot and left it in the lot." I went outside and looked at the parking area. My truck was there, the blue Kenworth, sitting in a spot near the fuel island looking exactly the way it had when I left Dead Horse a lifetime ago. I walked over to it slowly, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. The cab was empty. The keys were in the ignition. The fuel gauge was showing full. Full. Like it had never been empty at all. Like the whole night of driving and running out of diesel and walking through the frozen dark had never happened. I climbed inside and sat in the driver's seat. Everything was the same. Everything was exactly the way I had left it. My coffee thermos in the cup holder, my logbook on the dash, my coat hanging on the hook behind the seat. The coat I was wearing right now. The coat I had been wearing all night. I looked at the coat on the hook. I looked at the coat I was wearing. They were the same coat, the exact same coat. Something on the dashboard caught my eye. A photograph tucked into the corner of the windshield where the sun visor meets the glass. I pulled it out and looked at it. It was a picture of me, standing in front of my truck on the side of a road that looked like the Dalton Highway, smiling at the camera, looking like I had just finished a successful run and wanted to commemorate the moment. I had never taken that photograph. I had never seen it before. But there I was, smiling, happy, frozen in a moment that would last forever. I thought about that wall in the roadhouse. All those drivers. All those photographs. All those people who had gone out on the road and never come back. I thought about Pete Garrison, who had picked me up in the middle of nowhere and driven me to safety. Pete Garrison, who had somehow also brought my truck to Coldfoot at the same time. Pete Garrison, whose face I had watched all during that ride, looking for signs of wrongness, looking for proof that he was one of them. I never saw any signs, but that did not mean they were not there. I left Coldfoot that morning and drove south, toward Fairbanks, toward home. I have not driven the northern route since then. I have not gone back to Dead Horse or run the Hall Road at night. I told my company I needed a different route and they gave me one, no questions asked. Maybe they could see something in my face. Maybe they had heard stories from other drivers. Maybe they knew. I still have the photograph. I do not know why I kept it. I should have burned it. I should have thrown it away and never thought about it again. But I kept it, and sometimes, late at night when I cannot sleep, I take it out and look at it. The man in the photograph is me. I am sure of that. Same face, same eyes, same scar above the left eyebrow. But there is something wrong with the way he is smiling. Something that does not quite fit. And sometimes, when I look at that photograph, I am not sure which one of us made it out of that roadhouse. I am not sure which one of us is still out there. The ice road across Great Slave Lake was supposed to be closed. That was what dispatch told me when I called in from Yellowknife that morning. Temperatures had been fluctuating for 3 days straight, climbing above freezing during the afternoons and then plummeting back down at night. The freeze-thaw cycle was weakening the ice, creating pockets of slush and pressure ridges that could swallow a truck whole. The territorial government had shut down the crossing until conditions stabilized. No exceptions. But I had a load of mining equipment that needed to reach a diamond operation on the far side of the lake, and every day of delay was costing somebody a lot of money. The dispatcher, a woman named Corinne, who had been running freight logistics in the Northwest Territories for 20 years, told me there might be another way. An older route that followed the eastern shore of the lake instead of cutting straight across. It added 6 hours to the trip and the road was rough, but it was still open. Technically, I should have waited. I knew that even then. But I had been driving ice roads for 9 years, and I had developed the kind of confidence that comes from surviving things that should have killed you. I had driven through whiteouts that reduced visibility to 0. I had crossed ice that groaned and cracked beneath my wheels. I had spent nights in my cab at 50 below, listening to the metal contract and wondering if the engine would start in the morning. I thought I knew what the North could do. I thought I was ready for anything. My name is Dawson Pike, and I was wrong. I left Yellowknife around noon, heading northeast on the winter road toward the lake. The sky was overcast, a flat, gray ceiling that seemed to press down on the landscape and squeeze out all the color. The trees along the road were black skeletons against the snow, birch and spruce stripped bare by the wind. There was no traffic. I had the road to myself, just me and 40 tons of drilling equipment and the silence of the northern bush. The route Corinne had given me was not on any of my maps. She had described it over the phone, turn by turn, and I had written the directions on a piece of paper that I kept on the dashboard. It was old, she said, a road from the early days of the mining boom, before they built the main ice crossing. Some of the markers might be missing. Some of the landmarks might have changed. But if I followed her directions carefully, I would reach the far shore by nightfall. The first 2 hours went smoothly. The road was rough but passable, frozen gravel and packed snow that my chains could handle. I made decent time, watching the mile markers count up as I pushed deeper into the bush. The overcast sky began to break up around mid-afternoon, patches of blue appearing between the clouds, and I started to think that maybe this run would not be so bad after all. Then the snow started. It came out of nowhere, the way it always does up here. One minute I could see for miles. The next minute I was driving through a wall of white. The flakes were small and hard, driven by a wind that had picked up without warning, and they hit my windshield like tiny fists. I slowed down and turned on my fog lights, but they did not help much. The snow just reflected the light back at me, turning the world into a featureless white blur. I checked my directions. According to Corinne, I should be approaching a junction where the road split, one fork continuing along the shore and the other heading out onto the lake ice. The shore route was longer but safer. The ice route was direct but risky given the current conditions. She had told me to take the shore route. She had been very clear about that. But I could not find the junction. The snow was too heavy, the visibility too poor. I kept driving, watching for any sign of a turnoff, any marker that would tell me where I was. Nothing, just the road and the snow and the darkness that was starting to gather at the edges of the day. I should have stopped. I should have pulled over and waited for the storm to pass. But stopping in a whiteout is almost as dangerous as driving in one. Other vehicles cannot see you. You can get buried. You can run your engine to stay warm and then run out of fuel and freeze. The safest thing is to keep moving, find shelter, get somewhere with walls and a roof and other people. So I kept driving. The road began to change. The gravel gave way to something smoother, harder, and I realized with a jolt of fear that I was on ice. I had missed the junction somehow. I had taken the wrong fork, and now I was out on the lake, driving across frozen water that the government had declared unsafe for travel. I stopped the truck and sat there for a long moment, trying to decide what to do. I could not see anything through the snow. I did not know how far I had come onto the ice, or how far I had to go to reach the other side. I did not know if the ice beneath me was solid, or if I was sitting on top of a pressure ridge that could give way at any moment. The smart thing would be to turn around, go back the way I came, find the shore route, add the extra hours to my trip, and arrive late, but alive. That was what any experienced ice road driver would do. That was what I should have done. But when I looked in my mirrors, I could not see the road behind me. The snow had covered my tracks. The way back was as invisible as the way forward. I was in the middle of the lake with no idea which direction led to safety and which direction led to open water. I made a decision. I would keep going forward. I would drive slowly, carefully, and trust that the ice would hold. The mining operation was on the far side of the lake. If I kept heading northeast, I would eventually reach it. I just had to stay calm and stay on course. The first sign of trouble came about 20 minutes later. I heard it before I felt it. A deep, groaning sound from somewhere beneath me, like a giant waking up from a long sleep. The ice was talking. That was what we called it when the frozen surface made noise. Usually it was just thermal expansion, the ice adjusting to temperature changes, nothing to worry about. But this sound was different. This sound was angry. I felt the vibration through my seat, through the steering wheel, through the floor of the cab. The ice was moving, not cracking, not yet, but shifting, settling. I could feel the whole surface tilting slightly like a table with an uneven leg. I pressed the accelerator gently, trying to get moving again without putting too much stress on the ice. The truck lurched forward, chains biting into the frozen surface. The groaning sound continued, following me, surrounding me. I could not tell where it was coming from. It seemed to be everywhere at once. The snow was still falling, still reducing visibility to almost nothing. I was driving blind, navigating by instinct and hope. The compass on my dashboard said I was heading northeast, but compasses could be unreliable this far north. The magnetic pole played tricks with the readings. I could be going in circles and never know it. Then the groaning stopped. The silence was worse. It meant the ice had finished moving. It meant whatever was going to happen had already happened. I held my breath and waited for the crack, for the sudden lurch, for the freezing water to come rushing up through the broken surface. But nothing happened. The ice held. I kept driving. It was almost dark when I saw the lights. They appeared out of the snow like a mirage, faint at first and then brighter as I got closer. A building, some kind of structure on the shore of the lake. I could see windows glowing with yellow light and smoke rising from a chimney. A roadhouse, one of the old supply stations that used to serve the mining camps before the main routes were established. I did not know there was a roadhouse on this part of the lake. Corinne had not mentioned it. But I was not going to question my luck. I needed to get off the ice. I needed shelter, warmth, a chance to wait out the storm and figure out where I was. I turned toward the lights and drove. The shore came up faster than I expected. One moment I was on ice, the next moment I was climbing a shallow bank onto solid ground. The roadhouse was just ahead. A long, low building made of logs and corrugated metal. It looked old, decades old, but the lights were on and smoke was coming from the chimney. Someone was there. Someone who could help me. I parked my truck in front of the building and climbed down from the cab. The wind hit me immediately, driving snow into my face and stealing my breath. I pulled my hood up and walked toward the door, my boots crunching on the frozen ground. There was no sign, no name on the building. Just a plain wooden door with a small window set into it. I knocked, no answer. I knocked again, harder, still nothing. I tried the handle and the door swung open. The inside of the roadhouse was warm. That was the first thing I noticed. Warm and dry and lit by oil lamps that cast flickering shadows on the walls. There was a main room with a counter and some tables and chairs, and a hallway leading back to what I assumed were private rooms. A fire was burning in a stone fireplace at the far end of the room, but there was no one there, no staff behind the counter, no customers at the tables. The place was empty. "Hello," I called out. "Anyone here?" No answer, just the crackle of the fire and the moan of the wind outside. I walked further into the room, looking around. The roadhouse was old but well-maintained. The furniture was simple but solid. There were photographs on the walls, black and white images of trucks and drivers from decades past. Men in heavy coats standing next to machines that looked primitive compared to what we drove now. Pioneers of the ice roads, the ones who had come before. I found a guest book on the counter and flipped through it. The entries went back years. Names and dates and brief comments about road conditions and weather. Most of them were from drivers passing through on the old route, the same route I was trying to take. But the most recent entry was from 3 years ago. No one had signed in since then. That was strange. If the roadhouse was abandoned, who had lit the fire? Who had turned on the lamps? Who was keeping this place warm and ready for guests? "Hello?" I called again. My voice sounded thin in the empty room. "Is anyone here?" I heard a sound from the hallway. A door opening and closing. Footsteps. A woman emerged from the back of the building. She was middle-aged, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and a weathered face that spoke of years in the north. She was wearing an apron and wiping her hands on a cloth, like she had been in the middle of preparing food. "Sorry," she said. "Did not hear you come in. Storm is loud tonight." I apologized for barging in and explained my situation. Lost on the ice crossing, caught in the whiteout, looking for shelter until the storm passed. She nodded like she had heard the story before. "Happens more than you would think," she said. "Drivers miss the junction, end up on the old route, find their way here. You are lucky you saw the lights. Not everyone does." I asked her name. "Maeve Cotter," she said. She ran the roadhouse with her husband, had been doing it for almost 30 years. I did not ask where her husband was. Something in her tone suggested I should not. She offered me food and a room for the night. I accepted gratefully. While she went to prepare something in the kitchen, I sat at one of the tables near the fire and tried to warm up. The heat felt good on my face and hands, but I could not shake the chill that had settled into my bones. It was not just the cold from outside, it was something else. Something about this place. I looked at the photographs on the walls again. The drivers in those pictures were all smiling, posing proudly next to their trucks. But there was something wrong with the images. Something I could not quite identify. The men looked happy, but their eyes did not match their smiles. They looked tired, worn down, like they had been driving for a very long time and had forgotten how to stop. Maeve came back with a bowl of stew and some bread. I thanked her and started eating. The food was good, hot and filling, exactly what I needed after hours on the road. She sat across from me and watched me eat, not saying anything, just watching. It made me uncomfortable, but I did not know how to ask her to stop. "The rooms are down the hall," she said when I finished. "Second and third doors on the right. Take whichever one you want. But do not go in the room at the end. That one stays locked." I asked her why. She did not answer for a long moment, just looked at me with those tired eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "There was a driver," she said, finally. "Years ago. He came through here just like you, lost on the ice, looking for shelter. We gave him a room. That room. But he was not right. Something had happened to him out on the lake, something that changed him. He stayed in that room for 3 days, would not come out, would not eat, would not talk to anyone. And then one morning he was gone. Door was still locked from the inside, but he was gone. We have not opened it since." I stared at her. That was not possible. A locked room, a man who disappeared. It sounded like a ghost story, the kind of thing drivers told each other to pass the time on long hauls. Maeve seemed to read my thoughts. "Believe what you want," she said, "but stay out of that room, for your own sake." I finished my meal and took my bag down the hall. The second room was small but clean, with a bed and a dresser and a window that looked out onto the storm. I could hear the wind howling outside, could see the snow driving past in horizontal sheets. I was glad to be inside, glad to be warm and safe and off the ice. But I could not stop thinking about that room at the end of the hall. I lay in bed and listened to the sounds of the roadhouse, the creak of the walls in the wind, the crackle of the fire in the main room, the occasional footsteps as Maeve moved around, doing whatever she did to keep this place running. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds. Then I heard something else. Footsteps, but not from the main room. From the hall. From the direction of the locked room. I sat up in bed and listened. The footsteps were slow and heavy, like someone walking with great effort. They went back and forth, pacing. I could hear them clearly through the wall. Someone was in that room. Someone was walking around in there. But Maeve had said the room was locked. She had said no one had opened it in years. I got out of bed and went to my door. Opened it a crack and looked down the hall. The door at the end was closed. No light showed underneath it. But I could still hear the footsteps. Back and forth. Back and forth. A rhythm like breathing. Like a heartbeat. I closed my door and got back in bed. I told myself it was nothing. The building settling in the cold. Pipes contracting. Some other mundane explanation, but I did not believe it. I knew what footsteps sounded like. And those were footsteps. I lay there in the dark and listened to them pace until I finally fell asleep. In my dreams, I was driving on the ice. The lake stretched out around me in all directions, flat and white and endless. There was no storm, no snow, just the ice and the sky and the silence. I drove and drove, but I never got anywhere. The shore never got closer. The ice went on forever. And somewhere behind me, something was following. I could not see it. I could only feel it. A presence, a weight. Something that was getting closer no matter how fast I drove. Something that would catch me eventually. I woke up before it reached me. But I knew it was still out there. Waiting. I woke to silence. The footsteps had stopped. The wind had died down. I lay in bed for a long moment, listening to the quiet, trying to convince myself that everything I had heard the night before had been a dream. Fatigue and stress and the disorientation of being lost on the ice. My mind playing tricks. Nothing more. But I knew that was not true. I got dressed and went out into the hall. The door at the end was still closed, same as before. I stood there looking at it, feeling the pull of curiosity warring with something deeper. Fear. The animal instinct that tells you some doors should stay shut. I walked to the door and put my hand on the wood. It was cold, colder than it should have been, colder than the air around it, like there was something on the other side drawing the heat away. I tried the handle. Locked, just like Maeve had said. I put my ear against the door and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no sound at all. Just a silence that felt deeper than ordinary silence. A silence that felt like something waiting. You should not be doing that. I jumped back from the door. Maeve was standing at the other end of the hall watching me. I had not heard her approach. She moved quietly for a woman her age. "I told you to stay away from that room," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "A warning. I heard something last night," I said. "Footsteps. Someone was walking around in there." Maeve did not answer right away. She just looked at me with those tired eyes, and I saw something in them that I had not noticed before. Not just weariness. Resignation. The look of someone who has seen something they cannot explain and has given up trying. "There is no one in that room," she said finally. "There has not been anyone in that room for years. Whatever you heard, it was not footsteps." I started to argue, but she cut me off. "Breakfast is ready. You should eat something before you go. Storm has passed, but the ice will be bad today. You will need your strength." She turned and walked back toward the main room. I looked at the door one more time, then followed her. The roadhouse looked different in daylight. Less cozy, more worn. I could see the cracks in the walls, the stains on the ceiling. The places where the wood had warped from years of freeze and thaw. The photographs on the walls looked older too. The images faded. The faces harder to make out. I wondered how long this place had really been here. how many drivers had passed through, how many had made it to the other side. I ate the breakfast Maeve put in front of me. Eggs and bacon and toast, simple fare but filling. She did not join me, just stood behind the counter and watched me eat like she had the night before. I wanted to ask her more questions about the room, about the driver who had disappeared, about this place and its history. But something told me she would not answer. Something told me she had already said more than she wanted to. When I finished, I thanked her and paid for the room and the meals. She took my money without counting it. "The ice road continues north along the shore," she said. "About 2 miles out you will see a marker, a red flag on a pole. That is where you turn east onto the lake. The ice should be solid there, but go slow. Listen for cracking. If you hear anything, stop and back up. Do not try to push through." I asked her about the mining operation, how much farther it was, how long it would take to get there. "You will reach it by nightfall if the ice holds," she said. "But the ice does not always hold. Sometimes it has other plans." I did not know what that meant, and she did not explain. I thanked her again and went outside. The storm had passed, just like she said. The sky was clear and pale, almost white, and the sun was a bright smear on the horizon that gave light but no warmth. The temperature had dropped overnight. My truck's thermometer showed -48. Cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. Cold enough to turn diesel fuel to gel if I let the engine sit too long. I did my walk-around inspection, checking the tires and chains and lights, making sure everything was in order. The truck looked fine. It had sat out in the storm all night, but nothing seemed damaged. I climbed into the cab and started the engine. It turned over on the first try, a good sign. I let it warm up for a few minutes, then put it in gear and pulled out of the roadhouse lot. I looked back once as I drove away. Maeve was standing in the window watching me go. She did not wave. The road along the shore was rough but passable. I could see the lake on my left, a flat, white expanse that stretched to the horizon. It looked solid from here, but I knew that appearances meant nothing. Ice could be 3 feet thick in one spot and 3 inches thick 10 yards away. You could not trust your eyes out here. You could only trust experience and luck, and I was running low on both. I found the marker about 2 miles out, a red flag on a wooden pole just like Maeve had said. The pole was old and weathered. The flag faded to a dull pink. It had been here for years, maybe decades. I wondered how many drivers had seen this flag and turned east onto the ice. I wondered how many of them had made it across. I made the turn and started out onto the lake. The ice felt different here than it had the night before. Harder. More stable. I could not hear any groaning or cracking. Could not feel any movement beneath my wheels. Just solid frozen water, strong enough to hold my truck and my load without complaint. I let myself relax a little. Maybe the worst was behind me. Maybe I would make it after all. I had been driving for about an hour when I saw the other truck. It was stopped on the ice ahead of me, maybe a quarter-mile away. A big rig, similar to mine, with the hood up and a figure moving around near the front. A breakdown. Someone who needed help. I approached slowly, watching for any signs that this was something other than what it appeared to be. But it looked legitimate. The truck was real, the person was real, and when I got closer I could see the problem. Steam was rising from the engine compartment. Overheating. A bad situation on a frozen lake in the middle of nowhere. I pulled up alongside and rolled down my window. The figure straightened up and looked at me. A man, maybe 50, with a thick beard and deep-set eyes. He was wearing heavy coveralls and a fur-lined hat, the uniform of someone who worked in the cold for a living. "Trouble?" I asked. He nodded. Thermostat stuck closed. Engine got too hot, cracked the housing on the water pump. I am losing coolant faster than I can replace it. Bad luck. I asked if he had called for help. Radio is not working, he said. Has not worked since I came out on the ice this morning. And there is no cell signal out here. I have been sitting for 2 hours hoping someone would come along. I told him I could give him a ride to the mining operation. It was not that far, maybe 4 hours at normal speed. He could get help there, come back for his truck with the right parts and equipment. He shook his head. Cannot leave it. I've got a full load of equipment that has to reach the operation today. If I abandon it, I lose the contract. I will figure something out. I understood. In this business, your reputation was everything. One missed delivery could cost you future work. But staying out here with a broken truck was dangerous. If the temperature dropped any further, if another storm came through, he could freeze to death before anyone found him. I am Dawson Pike, I said. I am running equipment to the same operation. If you want, I can send help back when I get there. He considered this. Ilya Sorenko, he said. I would appreciate that. We talked for a few more minutes. He was an independent operator out of Yellowknife, same as me. He had been running ice roads for 15 years, longer than most drivers lasted in this business. He knew the routes, knew the dangers, knew what the cold could do. But even experience could not protect you from bad luck and broken parts. I gave him some of my coffee and a spare blanket from my sleeper. He thanked me and told me to drive safe. I told him I would send help as soon as I could. I pulled away from his truck and continued east. In my mirrors, I could see him standing by his rig, watching me go. He looked small against the vastness of the ice, small and alone. I hoped he would be okay. I hoped help would reach him in time. The ice began to change about an hour after I left Ilya. It started with the sound, a low hum that I felt more than heard, vibrating up through my seat and into my spine. At first, I thought it was my engine, some new problem developing, but when I checked my gauges, everything looked normal. The sound was not coming from my truck, it was coming from below. I slowed down and listened. The hum rose and fell in waves, almost like breathing. It seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, from the entire surface of the lake. The ice was making noise again. But this was not the groaning I had heard the night before. This was something else, something deeper. Then the scraping started, metal on metal. A harsh, grinding sound that cut through the hum like a knife. It was coming from directly beneath my truck, from somewhere under the ice. I stopped and listened, my heart pounding. The scraping continued, moving back and forth like something was trying to claw its way up through the frozen surface. I looked out the window, but I could not see anything, just ice, smooth and white and featureless. But I could hear it. I could hear something down there, something moving, something alive. The scraping stopped as suddenly as it had started. The hum faded away. Silence returned, heavy and complete. I sat in my truck and tried to understand what I had just heard. There was nothing beneath the ice. The lake was frozen solid. Even if there had been water below, there was nothing living in it. Not this far north, not in these temperatures. Whatever made that sound, it could not have been what it sounded like. I started driving again, faster this time. I wanted to get across this lake as quickly as possible. The sound came back about 20 minutes later. This time, it was louder. The hum had an edge to it, a vibration that I could feel in my teeth. The scraping was more aggressive, more insistent. It was following me. Whatever was down there, it was keeping pace with my truck, staying right beneath me as I drove. I pushed the accelerator harder. The truck lurched forward, chains biting into the ice. The scraping sound kept up, matching my speed, staying with me. I could hear it clearly now, a rhythmic grinding that sounded almost deliberate, almost purposeful. And then I heard something else. A voice. It was faint, muffled by the ice, but it was definitely a voice. A man's voice, calling out. I could not make out the words, just the tone, desperate, pleading, like someone trapped and crying for help. I stopped the truck. The voice continued, rising and falling. I could almost understand it now, almost, but not quite. It was like listening to someone talk through a wall. You knew they were speaking, but you could not tell what they were saying. I got out of the truck and stood on the ice. The cold hit me immediately, needles of frost piercing through my gear. I ignored it and listened. The voice was clearer out here, closer, coming from somewhere right below my feet. "Hello," I called out. "Can you hear me? Where are you?" The voice stopped. For a long moment there was nothing, just the silence and the cold and the white expanse of the frozen lake stretching away in all directions. I was alone out here, completely alone. Whatever I had heard, whoever had been calling out, they were gone now. I was about to get back in my truck when I saw the shadow. It was beneath the ice, maybe 10 feet down, a dark shape, long and irregular that seemed to be moving slowly through the frozen water. I could not tell what it was. A log, a piece of debris, some remnant of the lake's unfrozen past, suspended in the ice like an insect in amber. But then it moved, not drifting, moving, deliberately. The shape shifted, rotated, and I caught a glimpse of something that made my stomach drop. It looked like a truck, a semi buried in the ice. The cab was visible, the windshield, the outline of the door, and behind the wheel a shape that might have been a person, sitting there, frozen, waiting. I stumbled backward, away from the shadow. My foot hit a patch of rough ice and I went down, landing hard on my side. Pain shot through my hip, but I barely noticed. I was staring at that shape beneath the ice, that impossible shape, trying to understand what I was seeing. The shadow moved again, rotated, and I realized with a jolt of pure terror that it was rising, coming up toward the surface, coming up toward me. I scrambled to my feet and ran for my truck. I did not look back. I climbed into the cab and slammed the door and put the truck in gear and drove. I drove as fast as I dared, faster than was safe, my chains throwing up chunks of ice behind me. I drove and I did not look down, and I did not listen for the sounds that might be following me. The shadow did not follow. Or if it did, I never saw it again. But I could not stop thinking about what I had seen. A truck buried in the ice. A driver frozen behind the wheel. How long had they been down there? How had they gotten there? The lake was supposed to be solid. The ice was supposed to be safe. I thought about Ilya back there with his broken water pump. Alone on the ice, waiting for help that might not come in time. I thought about the roadhouse, about Maeve and her warnings, about the locked room and the footsteps I had heard in the night. I thought about the driver who had disappeared from that room years ago. The one who had come in off the ice changed. Wrong. The one who had locked himself in and then vanished without opening the door. And I wondered if the lake had taken him too. The mining operation appeared on the horizon about 2 hours later. A cluster of buildings and equipment, lights blazing against the gathering dark. I had made it. I had crossed the lake. I was safe. But I did not feel safe. I felt like something had followed me across the ice. Something that was still with me. Something that was waiting for me to let my guard down. And somewhere back there, Ilya Sarenko was still standing by his broken truck. Alone. In the dark. On top of whatever was buried in the ice. I had to send help. I had to get someone back there before nightfall, before the ice decided to take him too. I reached the mining operation just as the last light was fading from the sky. The place was bigger than I expected. A sprawling complex of prefab buildings and heavy equipment spread across the frozen shore. Floodlights blazed everywhere, pushing back the Arctic darkness. I could see workers moving between structures, trucks lined up at loading bays, the constant activity of an operation that never stopped. It should have felt safe. It should have felt like civilization. But all I could think about was Ilya. I found the dispatch office and told them about the stranded driver, gave them his location, his name, the nature of his breakdown. The dispatcher was a heavy-set man with a beard that looked like it had not been trimmed in months. He listened to my report and typed something into his computer. "We will send someone out," he said. "Got a recovery team that handles breakdowns on the ice road. They can have a truck out there in a couple of hours. A couple hours." That meant Ilya would be alone on the ice until at least midnight. Alone in the dark at 50 below with nothing but a broken truck and a spare blanket. "Can you get someone out there sooner?" I asked. "He has been sitting since this morning. If the temperature drops any further, he could be in real trouble." The dispatcher shrugged. "Recovery team is out on another call right now. Stuck truck about 40 miles north of here. They will head to your guy as soon as they finish up. Best I can do." I wanted to argue, but I knew it would not help. These operations ran on schedules and priorities. A stranded driver was a problem, but not an emergency. Not yet. I unloaded my cargo and completed my paperwork. The whole time I kept thinking about Ilya standing by his truck, watching the sky get dark, waiting for lights that were still hours away. I thought about the sounds I had heard on the ice, the voice calling out from below, the shadow rising toward the surface. I thought about going back for him myself. It was a crazy idea. I had just spent most of the day crossing that lake, fighting through a whiteout and listening to things that should not exist. The smart thing was to stay here, get some rest. Let the recovery team handle it. That was what any reasonable driver would do. But I could not shake the feeling that Ilya did not have hours to wait. I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong out there on the ice, something that was getting worse as the darkness deepened. I found the dispatcher again. "I am going back out," I told him. "I am going to stay with that driver until your team gets there." He looked at me like I was insane. "You just came off the ice. You have been driving all day. You need to rest. I will rest when I know he is okay." The dispatcher shook his head, but he did not try to stop me. He gave me the frequency for the recovery team's radio and told me to check in when I reached Ilya's position. I thanked him and went back to my truck. The night had fully arrived by the time I pulled out of the mining operation. The sky was black and clear, stars scattered across it like chips of ice. The northern lights were out again, pale green curtains rippling along the horizon. Beautiful and cold and utterly indifferent to anything that happened beneath them. I drove back onto the ice and headed west. The lake felt different at night. During the day, it had been vast and empty and bright with reflected sunlight. Now it was vast and empty and dark, my headlights cutting 2 narrow tunnels through the blackness. I could not see the edges of the ice anymore. Could not see anything except the road directly ahead of me. It was like driving through space, like the rest of the world had disappeared, and there was nothing left but me and the road and the endless frozen void. I watched my odometer, counting the miles. Ilya had been about 4 hours out from the mining operation when I found him that morning. Maybe a little less if I pushed the speed. I tried not to think about what I might find when I got there. Tried not to think about the shadow beneath the ice. The first hour passed without incident. The ice was solid and smooth. The air was still. No sounds from below, no shapes in the darkness. Just the rumble of my engine and the crunch of my chains, and the vast silence of the frozen lake. Then my GPS flickered. I looked at the screen. The display was jumping, the map scrolling back and forth like it could not decide where I was. The position marker hopped from one spot to another, showing me on the ice, then on the shore, then somewhere in the middle of the lake where there was no road at all. I tapped the screen, but it did not help. The system was confused, lost. I checked my compass. It was spinning slowly, the needle drifting in lazy circles instead of pointing north. The magnetic anomalies up here could do that sometimes. Throw off your instruments, make you doubt your own sense of direction. I kept driving. I knew this route. I had driven it twice already. I did not need electronics to tell me where I was going. I just needed to keep heading west, and I would find Elia. But the ice did not feel right anymore. It was subtle at first, a slight roughness beneath my tires, a sense that the surface was not as solid as it had been. I slowed down and listened. No groaning, no cracking. But something was different. Something had changed. I checked my watch. I had been driving for almost 2 hours. I should be getting close to Ilya's position by now, but there was nothing ahead of me. No truck, no lights, just the darkness and the ice and the stars burning cold and distant overhead. I stopped the truck and got out. The silence was absolute. I stood on the ice and listened, but there was nothing to hear. No wind, no sound from the depths, nothing at all. The world felt empty, hollow, like I was the only thing left alive in it. I walked a few yards from my truck and looked around. The ice stretched away in all directions, flat and featureless. I could not see any landmarks, could not see the shore, could not see anything that would tell me where I was or which way I should go. I was lost. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was lost on the ice in the middle of the night with a GPS that did not work and a compass that could not find north. I could drive in circles for hours and never find Ilya. Never find the mining operation. Never find anything except more ice and more darkness until my fuel ran out and the cold came in and took me. I got back in my truck and tried the radio. "Recovery team, this is Pike. Do you copy?" Static, nothing but static. I tried again. "Anyone on this frequency, this is Dawson Pike on Great Slave Lake. I am trying to reach a stranded driver and I have lost my position. Does anyone copy?" More static, then a voice. Faint and broken, cutting in and out. "Pike, read you, position, marker." The voice faded into noise. I adjusted the frequency, trying to get a cleaner signal. "Say again, I did not copy your last transmission. What is your position? 20 miles, north, ice breaking, do not..." The transmission cut out completely. I tried to raise them again, but there was nothing. The radio was dead. Ice breaking. That was what they had said, or what I thought they had said. Ice breaking somewhere to the north. A crew in trouble. More drivers stranded on a lake that was falling apart beneath them. I sat in my truck and tried to think. I could not find Ilya if I could not find my own position. I could not help anyone if I was lost myself. I needed to get off this ice. I needed to find the shore and reorient myself and figure out what to do next. I turned south, or what I thought was south based on the stars. I drove slowly, carefully, watching for any sign of land, any indication that I was getting closer to solid ground. The ice began to change. I felt it first in the steering, a looseness, a give that had not been there before. The surface was softening. The freeze-thaw cycle that had shut down the main crossing was happening here too. The ice was weakening and I was driving on top of it with 40 tons of truck and no idea where I was going. I stopped again, got out, listened. The groaning was back. It was coming from all around me now, a deep vibration that I could feel in my chest. The ice was talking and it was not happy. It was shifting, settling, adjusting to stresses that I could not see. I needed to move. I needed to get off this lake before the surface gave way beneath me. I drove faster. Too fast for conditions, but I did not care. The groaning was getting louder, closer. I could feel the ice moving beneath my wheels, rolling like the deck of a ship in a storm. The surface was not solid anymore. It was alive, flexing and breathing, and I was a weight that it wanted to throw off. A crack appeared ahead of me. It shot across the ice from left to right, a dark line that opened up in the white surface like a wound. I hit the brakes and the truck slid, chains screaming on the ice. I stopped maybe 10 feet from the crack, close enough to see the black water beneath, close enough to feel the cold rising up from it. I sat there shaking, staring at that crack, watching it widen slowly, inch by inch, as the ice continued to shift. The water below was perfectly still, perfectly black, like a doorway into nothing. I backed up, turned around, headed the other way, looking for a path that would take me off the ice without crossing that crack. The groaning was constant now, a sound like the whole lake was crying out in pain. I drove, and I listened, and I prayed that the surface would hold. The shore appeared out of the darkness about 20 minutes later. I almost sobbed with relief when I saw it. The land rising up from the ice, solid and real and safe. I drove toward it as fast as I dared, watching for more cracks, listening for the sounds of breaking ice. But the surface held. I climbed the bank and felt my wheels grip solid ground, and I knew I was going to be okay. I stopped and caught my breath, tried to figure out where I was. The shore was unfamiliar, rocky and barren, with scattered trees that looked different from the ones I'd seen that morning. I checked my GPS, but it was still not working. Checked my compass, but it was still spinning. I had no idea where I was. I only knew that I was off the ice, and that was enough for now. I drove along the shore looking for landmarks, looking for anything that would tell me my position. The road was rough, barely more than a trail, and I had to go slow. Trees pressed in from both sides. The darkness felt thicker here, closer. Then I saw the lights, a building ahead, windows glowing yellow, smoke from a chimney, the roadhouse. I had come back to the same place I had left that morning. Somehow, impossibly, I had driven all the way across the lake and back again without finding Elia, without reaching the mining operation, without getting anywhere at all. I was right back where I started. I pulled into the lot and sat there for a long moment, trying to understand, trying to make sense of what had happened. My GPS flickered to life. The screen steadied, the map appeared, and I could see my position clearly for the first time in hours. I was at the roadhouse on the eastern shore of the lake. The mining operation was 40 miles to the west. Ilya's last known position was about 20 miles out on the ice. I checked the timestamp on my GPS track. The record of everywhere I had been logged automatically by the satellite. There was a gap. The track showed me leaving the mining operation, showed me driving out onto the ice. Then nothing. 15 minutes of nothing. No position, no movement, no data at all. The system had lost me completely, and when the track resumed, I was here, at the roadhouse, on the wrong side of the lake. 15 minutes. I had lost 15 minutes somewhere on that ice. 15 minutes that the satellites could not see. 15 minutes where I had been nowhere at all. The door of the roadhouse opened. Maeve stepped out and looked at my truck. She did not seem surprised to see me. She did not seem surprised at all. "I knew you would be back," she said. "They always come back." I got out of the truck and walked toward her. I was tired and scared and confused, and I needed answers. "What is happening?" I said. "What is out there on that ice? What happened to me?" Maeve looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped aside and gestured toward the open door. "Come inside," she said. "You need to see something." I followed her into the roadhouse. The fire was burning. The lamps were lit. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, except for the door at the end of the hall. It was open. The door stood open at the end of the hall. I stared at it from the main room, feeling something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. That door had been locked. Maeve had told me it had been locked for years. No one had opened it since the driver disappeared, but it was open now. Maeve walked past me, toward the hall, and stopped at the threshold. She looked back at me with those tired eyes. "You wanted to know what is out there on the ice," she said. "You wanted to understand what happened to you. The answer is in that room. It has always been in that room." I did not move. I did not want to see what was behind that door. I did not want to know what had happened to the driver who had locked himself inside and vanished. But I also knew that I could not leave without looking. I could not drive back across that lake without understanding what I was dealing with. I walked down the hall. The door was old wood, same as the others, but it looked different up close. The surface was marked with scratches, deep gouges in the grain like someone had tried to claw their way out, or claw their way in. The handle was tarnished, the metal worn smooth by years of hands gripping it. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small, smaller than the one I had slept in. There was a bed against one wall, a dresser against another, a window that looked out onto the darkness. Everything was covered in frost. A thin layer of ice coated every surface, glittering in the light from the hall. The air was cold, much colder than the rest of the roadhouse, cold enough to see my breath. But that was not what made me stop. On the wall above the bed, someone had written words, scratched them into the wood with something sharp, carving deep letters that were still legible after all these years. I stepped closer and read them. The lake takes. The lake keeps. The lake gives back. Below the words, there were marks. Tally marks, grouped in fives, covering most of the wall. Dozens of them, hundreds, like someone had been counting days, or counting something else. I turned to Maeve. She was standing in the doorway, watching me. "What does this mean?" I asked. What was he counting? She did not answer right away. She looked at the wall, at the scratched words and the endless tally marks, and something in her face shifted. Sadness, or maybe recognition. "He was counting the drivers," she said finally, "the ones the lake took. He could hear them," he said, "hear them calling out from under the ice. He said he had to keep track, had to remember them, had to make sure someone knew they were down there." I thought about the voice I had heard on the ice, the man calling out from below. Desperate, pleading. "He heard them too," I said. Maeve nodded. He heard them, and then he went to join them. I looked at the window. It was closed, latched from the inside. The door had been locked. There was no way out of this room except through the hall. "How did he leave?" I asked. "You said the door was still locked when he disappeared. How did he get out?" Maeve shook her head. "He did not get out. He went down, through the floor, through the ice. The lake came up and took him, same as it takes all of them. Same as it tried to take you tonight." I looked at the floor. It was wood, same as the rest of the roadhouse. Solid. No cracks, no gaps, no sign that anything had ever come through it. But there was frost there too, a thin layer of ice spreading out from the center of the room like something had frozen it from below. I backed towards the door. "The lake is not just water," Maeve said. "It is not just ice. It is something else. Something old. Something that has been here longer than any of us. The drivers who go out on it. The ones who do not come back. They become part of it. They are still out there, still driving, still looking for the other side. And sometimes they call out to the ones who are still alive. Sometimes they try to bring them down. I thought about the shadow I had seen beneath the ice, the truck buried in the frozen water, the driver sitting behind the wheel. "Ilya," I said, "the driver I left out there, is he—" "I do not know," Maeve said. "Maybe the recovery team reached him. Maybe he is safe at the mining operation right now, warming up and telling them about the crazy driver who promised to send help and never came back. Or maybe the lake took him. Maybe he is down there with the others, driving through the dark, calling out for someone to find him." I pushed past her and walked back to the main room. I needed to get out of this place. I needed to get back on the road and find out what had happened to Ilya. I needed to know if he was alive. "You cannot go back out there tonight," Maeve said, following me. "The ice is too unstable. You will end up in the water before you get halfway across." "I do not care. I have to find him." She grabbed my arm. Her grip was stronger than I expected. "Listen to me," she said. "I have seen this before. Drivers who go out on that lake and come back changed. Drivers who hear the voices and cannot stop listening. If you go back out there tonight, you will not come back. The lake will take you and it will not give you back." I pulled away from her. "I am not leaving him out there." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she let go. "There's a radio in the office," she said. "The mining operation frequency. You can try to reach them, find out if the recovery team got to your friend. But do not go back on the ice. Not tonight. Not until the sun comes up and you can see what you are driving on." I went to the office and found the radio. It was old, a battered unit that looked like it had been there since the roadhouse was built. I turned it on and dialed in the frequency that the dispatcher had given me. "Mining operation. This is Dawson Pike. Do you copy?" "Static." I tried again. "This is Pike at the Eastern Shore Roadhouse. I am trying to get status on a recovery operation. Driver named Ilya Sarenko, stranded on the ice about 20 miles out. Do you copy?" More static. Then a voice, faint but clear. "Pike, this is base. We copy. Recovery team reached the position about an hour ago. There was no one there." My heart stopped. "What do you mean, no one there? Where is Sarenko?" "Truck was there, still running. Hood up, just like you described. But no driver. Recovery team searched the area, but they could not find him. No tracks, no sign of where he went. It is like he just vanished." I sat down heavily. The room felt like it was spinning. "That is not possible," I said. "He was there. I talked to him. I gave him coffee and a blanket. He was waiting for help." "I understand," the voice said. "But he's not there now. We have got crews searching the area, but in the dark, with these temperatures, it is going to be hard to find anything." "I am sorry, Pike. We will keep looking, but you should prepare yourself." I turned off the radio. Ilya was gone. He had been standing right there by his truck when I left him, and now he was gone. No tracks, no sign, just vanished into the frozen air. The lake takes. The lake keeps. I thought about those words scratched into the wall. I thought about the tally marks all those drivers counted and remembered. I thought about the voice I had heard calling out from beneath the ice. Had that been Ilya? Had the lake taken him while I was driving in circles, lost and confused, unable to find my way back to him? Had he called out for help and gotten no answer because I was trapped in those 15 missing minutes, suspended somewhere that the satellites could not see? Or had something else happened, something worse? I stayed at the roadhouse that night. I did not sleep. I sat by the fire and stared into the flames and listened to the silence. Maeve came and went, bringing me coffee, checking on me, but she did not say anything. There was nothing to say. In the morning, I drove back to the mining operation. The ice was solid in the daylight, stable and smooth, and I made the crossing without incident. No sounds from below, no shadows rising toward the surface. No voices calling out for help. Just the ice and the sky and the long white road stretching ahead of me. They never found Ilya Surenko. The search went on for 3 days. Crews on snowmobiles, helicopters with thermal imaging, dogs trained to find people buried in snow. Nothing. He was gone, as completely as if he had never existed. His truck was recovered and towed back to Yellowknife. His family was notified. His name was added to the list of drivers who had disappeared on the ice roads, cause unknown. I gave a statement to the territorial police, told them everything I had seen and heard. They listened politely and wrote it all down, but I could tell they did not believe me. Voices from under the ice, shadows that looked like buried trucks. 15 minutes that the GPS could not account for. It sounded crazy. It sounded like the ravings of a driver who had spent too long alone in the cold. Maybe it was. Maybe the whole thing was hypothermia and stress and the isolation playing tricks on my mind. Maybe Ilya wandered away from his truck in a confused state and fell through thin ice somewhere that the searchers never checked. Maybe there was a rational explanation for everything, but I did not believe it. I went back to the roadhouse one more time before I left the territory. I do not know why. I just felt like I needed to see it again, needed to confirm that it was real. The building was there, same as before. Smoke from the chimney, lights in the windows. I parked my truck and went inside. Maeve was behind the counter. She looked at me and nodded, like she had been expecting me. "Did they find him?" she asked. No, she did not seem surprised. She reached under the counter and pulled out a piece of paper, handed it to me. "This was in the room," she said. "The room at the end of the hall. I found it this morning." I looked at the paper. It was a page from a logbook, the kind that drivers use to record their hours and routes. The handwriting was neat and careful. November 17th. Great Slave Lake Crossing. Departed Yellowknife 600. Weather clear. Ice conditions good. That was my departure date. My route. My handwriting. But I had not written it. I turned the page over. On the back, there were more words. Different handwriting this time. Shakier. More desperate. "He is still out there. I can hear him calling. He does not know he is gone. He thinks he is still waiting for help. Someone has to tell him. Someone has to make him understand." Below the words, there was a tally mark. Just one. Fresh and dark, carved into the paper hard enough to tear it. I looked up at Maeve. "Who wrote this?" I asked. She did not answer. She just looked at me with those tired eyes, and I saw something in them that I had not noticed before. Recognition. Like she was seeing someone she knew, someone she had been expecting. "The lake gives back," she said, "but it does not give back the same thing it took." I left the roadhouse and drove south. I drove all the way to Yellowknife and I kept driving. I did not stop until I was out of the territories, out of the north, away from the ice and the cold and the silence that felt like something waiting. I do not drive ice roads anymore. I told my dispatcher that I was done with the northern routes. I would haul freight anywhere else. Mountains, deserts, coastal highways, anywhere that the ground was solid and the water stayed where it belonged. He did not argue. Maybe he had heard stories about what happened on Great Slave Lake. Maybe he understood. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty country, I think I hear something. A voice, faint and far away, calling out for help. A man's voice, tired and confused, asking if anyone can hear him. Asking if help is coming. I tell myself it is just the radio. Just interference from some distant signal bleeding through. I tell myself it is nothing. But I know that voice, and I know that somewhere out there, on a frozen lake in the Northwest Territories, Ilya Surenko is still waiting by his truck, still watching the horizon for headlights that will never come, still believing that someone is on their way. The lake takes, the lake keeps, and sometimes, late at night, the lake gives back, but not the same, never the same. The convoy was supposed to be 3 trucks. That was what Buck Weller told me when I signed on for the run. 3 rigs hauling mining supplies from Inuvik to a survey camp on the Mackenzie Delta. 2 days out, 2 days back, good money for a week's work. Buck had been running convoys on these northern routes for 25 years. He knew the roads, knew the weather, knew how to keep drivers alive when the temperature dropped to 60 below, and the wind came screaming across the tundra like something that wanted you dead. If Buck said it was a 3-truck job, then it was a 3-truck job. But when I showed up at the staging area that morning, there were only 2 rigs in the lot, mine and Buck's. I found him in the dispatch office, going over paperwork with a cup of coffee that looked like it had been sitting there for hours. He was a big man, Buck, with hands like shovels and a face that had been weathered by decades of Arctic wind. He looked up when I came in, but he did not smile. "Where is the 3rd truck?" I asked. He set down his coffee. Keegan backed out. "Family emergency." That left us short. 2 trucks instead of 3. It meant longer shifts, less redundancy, more risk if something went wrong on the road. "We should postpone," I said. "Wait until we can get another driver." Buck shook his head. "Client is paying a rush fee. They need this equipment at the camp by Thursday or they lose their drilling window. We go today or we do not go at all." I did not like it. I had been driving freight in the Northwest Territories for 6 years, and I knew that cutting corners in the north was a good way to end up dead. But I also knew that Buck would not take a risk he did not think he could manage. If he said we could do it with 2 trucks, then we could do it with 2 trucks. My name is Harlan Vexler. I wish I had listened to my gut. We pulled out of Inuvik around 9 in the morning, Buck in the lead and me following about a quarter-mile back. The sky was clear and pale, the sun hanging low on the horizon even though it was almost noon. This far north in November, you only got a few hours of daylight. The rest was darkness and cold, and the northern lights dancing across the sky like ghosts. The route took us north along the Dempster Highway, then east on a series of winter roads that crossed the frozen delta. It was rough country, flat and white and featureless, with nothing to see but snow and ice and the occasional cluster of stunted trees. The wind was constant, a steady pressure against the side of my truck that made me fight the steering wheel for every mile. I had driven this route before. Not often, but enough to know the landmarks and the danger spots. There was a stretch about 4 hours out where the road crossed a series of frozen channels, ice bridges that could be tricky in bad weather. And there was a section further on where the route passed through an area that the locals called the Barrens. Just empty tundra for 50 miles in every direction. No shelter, no services, no help if something went wrong. Buck came on the radio about an hour into the drive. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who had seen everything and was not impressed by any of it. "Pike, this is Weller. How are you running back there?" I keyed my mic. "Running fine. Road is good. Winds are manageable. Copy that. We will stop at the fuel cache in about 3 hours. Top off the tanks and check the loads. Should put us at the camp by midnight if we keep this pace." I acknowledged and signed off. 3 hours to the fuel cache, then another 6 or 7 to the camp. It was going to be a long day, but nothing I had not done before. The first sign of trouble came about 2 hours later. I noticed that Buck was slowing down. His tail lights brightened as he touched his brakes, and his speed dropped from 50 to 40 to 30. I slowed to match, watching his truck for any indication of what was wrong. "Weller, this is Vexler. You've got a problem up there." There was a pause. Then his voice came back, but it sounded different. Tighter. There's something on the road ahead. Looks like a vehicle. Stand by. I peered through my windshield, but I could not see past Buck's trailer. We were in a flat section of the route, the road cutting straight across the tundra toward the horizon. There should not have been anything out here. No traffic, no breakdowns, nothing. We were 50 miles from the nearest town, and the only vehicles on this road were supposed to be ours. Buck stopped. I pulled up behind him and waited. A minute passed, then another. I could see Buck's door open and a figure climb down from the cab. He walked forward toward whatever he had seen on the road and disappeared from my line of sight. I sat in my truck and waited. The wind rocked my trailer gently. The engine idled. The heater blew warm air across my face. Everything felt normal, except for the knot that was forming in my stomach. Buck's voice came over the radio. "Vexler, get up here, you need to see this." I climbed down from my cab and walked forward along the road. The cold hit me immediately. That deep Arctic cold that finds every gap in your clothing and drives needles into your skin. I pulled my hood up and kept walking. Buck was standing about 50 yards ahead of his truck. He was looking at something on the side of the road, and when I got closer I saw what it was. A truck, a semi, just like ours, parked on the shoulder with its nose pointing north. It was covered in snow and ice, the windshield opaque with frost, the whole vehicle looking like it had been sitting there for a long time. Days at least, maybe longer. "Someone broke down," I said. "We should check if there's anyone inside." Buck shook his head. He did not take his eyes off the truck. "I know this rig," he said. His voice was quiet, flat. "This is Truman Red's truck." The name hit me like a punch. Truman Red. I had never met the man, but every driver in the territories knew his story. He had been running freight on these routes for 30 years, one of the old-timers who had pioneered the winter roads back when they were nothing but frozen rivers and good intentions. He was a legend, and he had disappeared. 3 years ago, Red had gone out on a run just like this one. Inuvik to the Delta, hauling supplies to a drilling camp. He had checked in at the fuel cache, reported good conditions, said he expected to reach the camp by nightfall. And then nothing. He never arrived. He never called in. He just vanished. They searched for weeks. Helicopters, ground crews, other drivers volunteering their time. Nothing. No truck, no driver, no sign of what had happened. It was like the tundra had just swallowed him up. Eventually, they called off the search. Truman Red was declared dead. His family held a funeral. The company retired his truck number. Life went on. But here was his truck, sitting on the side of the road, 50 miles from anywhere, looking like it had been waiting for someone to find it. "That is not possible," I said. "They searched this whole area. They would have found it." Buck did not answer. He walked toward the truck slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something that might be dangerous. I followed him. The closer we got, the worse the truck looked. The tires were flat, frozen to the ground. The paint was faded and peeling. The chrome was pitted with rust. This truck had not been here for 3 years. It looked like it had been here for 30. Buck reached the driver's door and tried the handle. It was frozen shut. He pulled harder, putting his weight into it, and the door came open with a crack of breaking ice. The cab was empty. No driver. No body. No sign that anyone had been there at all. Just an empty seat, a steering wheel covered in frost, and a layer of ice on every surface. The cold coming out of that cab was intense, deeper than the air outside, like the truck had been refrigerated from the inside. Buck climbed up onto the running board and looked around the interior. I watched him from the ground, not wanting to get any closer. "His logbook is here," Buck said. He reached inside and pulled out a worn notebook, the kind that drivers used before everything went electronic. He flipped through the pages, scanning the entries. "Last entry is November 19th, he said, 3 years ago, the day he disappeared. He handed me the logbook. I looked at the final entry. November 19th, departed fuel cache 1430, weather deteriorating, visibility poor, will push through to camp, ETA 2100. That was it, the last words Truman Red had written. The last record of his existence. He had left the fuel cache in bad weather and driven into the storm and never come out. I handed the book back to Buck. "What do we do?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking at the truck, looking at the empty cab where his friend had sat 3 years ago, driving toward a destination he would never reach. "We call it in," he said, finally. "Report the location. Let the authorities handle it. And the run, we keep going." Red would have wanted us to finish the job. I was not sure that was true. I was not sure what Truman Red would have wanted. But Buck was the convoy leader, and it was his call. We went back to our trucks and Buck radioed the report to dispatch in Inuvik. He gave them the coordinates of the abandoned vehicle and the identification marks that confirmed it was Red's rig. The dispatcher said they would send a recovery team out as soon as possible, but it might be a day or two given the remote location. Buck signed off, and we got back on the road. I could not stop thinking about that truck as we drove. The way it had looked, sitting there on the side of the road like it had been waiting for us. The way the cold had felt coming out of that cab. Colder than it should have been. Colder than the air outside. The way Buck's face had changed when he recognized it. Like he was seeing a ghost. I had heard stories about Truman Red over the years. All drivers hear stories about the ones who disappear. How he was one of the best. A man who could read the weather and the ice like a book. How he never took unnecessary risks, never pushed when he should have pulled back. How his disappearance made no sense because he was the last driver anyone would expect to lose out here. And now his truck had appeared out of nowhere, 3 years after the search was called off, sitting on a road that had been driven by hundreds of vehicles since then. A road that had been searched and cleared and traveled without anyone seeing a thing. It was not possible, but here we were. We reached the fuel cache about an hour later. It was a small outpost, just a few storage tanks and a heated shelter where drivers could warm up and check their equipment. There was no one there. The cache was automated, unmanned most of the time. You swiped your card, pumped your fuel, and kept moving. Buck and I topped off our tanks and went into the shelter to eat something and stretch our legs. We did not talk much. The discovery of Red's truck had put a weight on the day that neither of us knew how to lift. I was finishing my coffee when Buck finally spoke. "I drove with Truman for 15 years, he said. He was looking out the window at the empty tundra. Best driver I ever knew. Careful, smart, never made mistakes. What do you think happened to him?" Buck shook his head. "I do not know. I have thought about it every day for 3 years and I still do not know. He just went out on the road and did not come back. No distress call, no sign of trouble, nothing. And now his truck shows up." Buck turned and looked at me. His eyes were hard. That truck was not there a week ago. I drove this route last Tuesday and it was not there. Someone put it there, or something. I did not know what to say to that. I did not know what to think. We finished our break and went back to the trucks. The sky was getting darker, the brief Arctic day already fading toward night. We still had 6 hours of driving ahead of us, 6 hours of darkness and cold and empty road. Buck came on the radio as we pulled out of the fuel cache. "Vexler, I need to tell you something. Go ahead. This section of road coming up, the part that goes through the barrens, That is where Truman was heading when he disappeared. That is the last place anyone knows he was. I felt that knot in my stomach tighten. "We have to go through it," Buck said. "There is no other route. But I want you to stay close. Keep my taillights in sight at all times. If anything happens, if you see anything strange, you call me immediately." "Understood." "Understood." We drove on into the darkness. The Barrens started about 30 minutes past the fuel cache. I knew the moment we entered them because the landscape changed. The scattered trees disappeared. The contours of the land flattened out. Everything became white and empty and endless, a frozen void that stretched to the horizon in every direction. I kept my eyes on Buck's taillights and tried not to think about what might be out there in the dark. About an hour into the Barrens, I started to feel like we were being watched. It was not anything specific. No sound, no movement, no shape in the darkness. Just a feeling, a prickling on the back of my neck, an instinct that something was out there, something that knew we were here. I told myself it was just nerves, just the story of Truman Red getting into my head. There was nothing out here, nothing but ice and snow and the wind. But the feeling did not go away. Buck's voice came over the radio. "Vexler, are you seeing this? Seeing what? Check your mirrors." I looked in my side mirror. At first I did not see anything. Just the darkness behind me, my own lights reflecting off the snow. Then I saw them. Headlights. A third set of headlights far behind us, following the same road. Another vehicle, out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, driving the same route we were driving. I grabbed my radio. "That is not possible. There was no one behind us at the fuel cache." "I know," Buck said. His voice was tight. "I have been watching them for 5 minutes. They are keeping pace with us. Same speed, same distance. They are following us." I stared at those headlights in my mirror. They were too far back to make out any details. Just 2 points of light, floating in the darkness. Who is it? I do not know. But I do not like it. Neither did I. We drove on. The headlights followed. And somewhere behind them, hidden by the darkness and the distance, I could not shake the feeling that Truman Red's truck was moving again, following us home. The headlights stayed with us for the next hour. Always the same distance back. Always the same speed. Never gaining, never falling behind. Just following. Watching. I kept checking my mirrors. Kept expecting them to disappear or turn off or do something that would explain what they were. But they just hung there in the darkness. 2 pale points of light that refused to go away. Buck tried raising them on the radio. All channels, all frequencies. Nothing. Whoever was back there, they were not answering. Or they were not able to answer. "I do not like this," Buck said over the radio. His voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. "There should not be anyone else on this road tonight. We are the only convoy scheduled for this route." "Maybe it is the recovery team," I said. "Coming out for Red's truck. They would not be coming from this direction. And they would answer the radio." He was right. I knew he was right. But I did not want to think about what else those headlights might be. We drove on. The Barrens stretched around us, flat and white and infinite. There were no landmarks out here, nothing to tell you that you were making progress. Just the road and the snow and the darkness pressing in from all sides. It felt like we were driving in place, like the world was moving past us, but we were staying still. The whiteout came without warning. One moment, I could see Buck's taillights clearly, red points in the darkness ahead. The next moment, they were gone, swallowed by a wall of white that descended on us like a curtain dropping. The snow was horizontal, driven by a wind that had come out of nowhere, and it hit my truck with a force that rocked the cab on its suspension. I slowed down immediately. In a whiteout, speed is death. You cannot see the road, cannot see other vehicles, cannot see anything except the snow swirling in your headlights. I dropped to 20, then 15, then 10, crawling forward and praying that I would not drive off the road or into the back of Buck's trailer. "Weller, this is Vexler. I have lost visual on you. What is your position?" Static. The radio crackled and hissed, but Buck's voice did not come through. I tried again. "Buck, do you copy? I am in zero visibility here. I need your position." More static. Then a sound that might have been a voice, but so broken and distorted that I could not make out any words. The storm was interfering with the signal, or something else was. I stopped the truck. There was no point in driving if I could not see where I was going. I would wait for the whiteout to pass, then find Buck and continue to the camp. It was the safest option. The only option. The wind howled around my truck, rocking it back and forth. The snow was so thick that I could not see my own hood. I was blind, deaf, cut off from everything. Just me and the storm and the cold. That was when the tapping started. 3 sharp raps on my driver's side window. Clear and distinct, cutting through the noise of the wind. I jumped in my seat, my heart lurching into my throat. I turned to look at the window, but I could not see anything. Just snow. Just white. Whoever or whatever had made that sound was invisible on the other side of the glass. The tapping came again, harder this time, more insistent. "Hello," I called out. "Who is there?" No answer. Just the wind and the snow and the darkness. I thought about opening the door. Thought about stepping out into the storm to see who was knocking. But something stopped me. Some instinct that told me the door needed to stay closed. That whatever was out there was not something I wanted to let in. The tapping moved. It was on my windshield now, right in front of my face. Tap, tap, tap. The glass vibrated with each impact. I stared at it, trying to see through the snow, trying to catch a glimpse of what was making the sound. But there was nothing. Just white. Then the tapping stopped. I sat there in the silence, breathing hard, waiting for it to start again. But it did not. Whatever had been outside my truck, it was gone. Or it was waiting. The whiteout began to thin about 10 minutes later. The snow eased, the wind died down, and visibility slowly returned. I could see the road ahead of me again. Could see the tundra stretching away on both sides. I could see Buck's truck, stopped about 100 yards ahead, his hazard lights flashing. I grabbed my radio. "Buck, are you okay? I lost you in the storm." His voice came back, clearer now, but still tense. "I am fine. You." Something was tapping on my truck. On the windows. I could not see what it was. There was a long pause. Then Buck's voice again, quieter. "We need to keep moving. We need to get through this section as fast as we can. What is out here, Buck? What is in this place?" "Nothing. Just keep driving. Stay close." He did not answer my question. I knew he would not answer my question. But I also knew that he knew something. Something about this stretch of road. Something about what had happened to Truman Red. Something he was not telling me. I put my truck in gear and followed him. The headlights were still behind us. I saw them as soon as I started moving. Same distance, same position. They had stayed with us through the whiteout, following blind, matching our pace even when we could not see our own hands in front of our faces. That was not possible. No one could drive through a whiteout like that. No one could maintain that kind of pursuit without being able to see. "Buck," I said into the radio, "they are still there. I know. What do we do?" "We keep driving. We do not stop until we reach the camp." His voice left no room for argument. We drove on. The barrens seemed to go on forever. Mile after mile of nothing. Flat, white emptiness that numbed the mind and drained the spirit. I tried to focus on Buck's taillights, on the road. on the simple mechanical act of driving. But my thoughts kept drifting back to that tapping on my windows, to the headlights that would not go away, to Truman Red's truck sitting on the side of the road after 3 years of being nowhere. I thought about the stories I had heard. Drivers who disappeared on these roads. Trucks that were found empty. Engines still running. Coffee still warm on the dash. The North took people. Everyone knew that. But most of the time there was an explanation. Mechanical failure. Bad weather. Poor decisions. Things that made sense. This did not make sense. Buck came on the radio again. There is a section coming up, about 10 miles ahead. The road passes through a narrow valley between 2 ridges. It is the only shelter on this stretch. We're going to stop there for a few minutes. Check the trucks, check ourselves. Decide what to do about our friend back there. I acknowledged. 10 miles, maybe 20 minutes at our current speed. I could do that. I just had to keep driving. The valley appeared out of the darkness like a crack in the world. 2 low ridges rising on either side of the road, blocking the wind, creating a pocket of relative calm in the endless chaos of the tundra. Buck pulled off the road and I followed, parking behind him in the shelter of the rocks. We got out of our trucks. The air was still here, the wind broken by the ridges. It was almost quiet, almost peaceful. I could hear my own breathing, could hear the tick of cooling metal from the engines. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds. Buck was standing by his truck, looking back the way we had come. I walked over to him. "Where are they?" I asked. He pointed. Far back, maybe half a mile, I could see the headlights. They had stopped when we stopped. They were waiting. "Who are they?" I said. "What do they want?" Buck did not answer right away. He was staring at those lights, his face hard, his eyes unreadable. "I have driven this road for 25 years, he said finally. "I have seen things out here that I cannot explain, things that should not be possible. Most of the time I just keep my head down and keep driving and try not to think about it too much. But sometimes you cannot ignore it. Sometimes it gets right up in your face and demands that you pay attention. Like now. Like now." He turned to me. His eyes were tired, scared. I had never seen Buck Weller scared before. "Truman Red was my partner," he said. "We drove together for 15 years. He was the best friend I ever had. And when he disappeared, I spent 6 months trying to find him. I drove every inch of this road. I walked the tundra. I talked to everyone who had seen him, everyone who knew him, and I found nothing, not a trace. It was like he had never existed. I waited for him to continue. But I found something else. Stories. From the old-timers, the ones who have been driving these roads since before there were roads. They told me about this place, the Barrens. They said it was not just empty. They said it was hungry. Hungry. Buck nodded. They said the land out here takes people. Not often, not everyone. But sometimes when the conditions are right, when someone drives through here alone, they just disappear. The land swallows them up. And then, sometimes, years later, it spits them back out. But not the same. Never the same. I thought about Red's truck, the way it had looked sitting on the side of the road. Old and weathered, like it had been there for decades, like it had been somewhere else, somewhere that time moved differently, and then returned. You think that is what happened to Truman. I do not know what happened to Truman. I just know that he drove into the Barrens and did not come out. And now his truck is back, and something is following us. And I do not think it is a coincidence. I looked back at those headlights, waiting, watching. What do we do? Buck took a breath. We finish the job. We deliver this cargo and we get the hell out of here. We do not stop again. We do not look back. We just drive until we reach the camp, and then we do not come back this way. Not ever. And if they follow us all the way, then we deal with it when we get there. It was not much of a plan, but it was all we had. We got back in our trucks and pulled out of the valley. The headlights started moving again as soon as we did, keeping their distance, maintaining their pursuit. I tried not to look at them, tried to focus on the road ahead, tried to tell myself that we were going to be okay. But I did not believe it. There was something out there in the darkness, something that had taken Truman Red 3 years ago, something that had been waiting all this time, and now it was following us. The road curved around a low rise and the valley disappeared behind us. We were back in the open, back in the barrens, with nothing between us and whatever was out there but the darkness and the cold. Buck's voice came over the radio. "Vexler, look at your mirrors." I looked. The headlights were closer. They had cut the distance in half. They were maybe a quarter mile back now, close enough that I could see the shape of the vehicle behind them. A truck, a semi, big and dark and moving fast. And on the door, just visible in the glow of the running lights, I could see letters. A name, Red. Truman Red's truck was following us. The truck that had been sitting on the side of the road 50 miles back. The truck that had been empty and abandoned and covered in 3 years of ice and snow. It was running, it was moving, it was chasing us down. Buck's voice crackled over the radio, tight with fear. "Drive, Vexler. Drive, and do not look back." I drove, but I could not stop looking back. And the truck kept getting closer. The truck gained on us with every mile. I had my foot to the floor, pushing my rig as hard as I dared on the frozen road. Buck was doing the same up ahead, his trailer swaying as he took the curves faster than he should. We were running, both of us, running from something that should not have been able to chase us. Truman Red's truck. The truck that had been sitting dead and frozen on the side of the road. The truck that had not moved in 3 years. It was behind us now, and it was getting closer. I could see it clearly in my mirrors. The cab, the trailer, the running lights blazing in the darkness. It looked different than it had when we found it. Cleaner, newer, wearer. Like the years of ice and rust had melted away. Like it was returning to what it had been before it disappeared. And behind the wheel I could see a shape. A figure. Someone was driving that truck, or something. "Weller," I called into the radio. "It is right behind me. Maybe 200 yards." "What do I do?" Buck's voice came back, strained. "Keep driving. Do not slow down. We are almost through the barrens. Once we clear this section, we will be okay. How do you know that?" "I do not know anything. Just drive." I drove. The speedometer climbed, 50, 55, 60. Too fast for the road, too fast for the conditions, but I did not care. The only thing that mattered was staying ahead of that truck. The only thing that mattered was not letting it catch us. The barrens stretched on forever. Flat, white nothing in every direction. No shelter, no landmarks, no sign that the world existed beyond this frozen void. Just the road and the darkness and the thing that was chasing us through it. Red's truck pulled closer. 100 yards now. I could see more details. The company logo on the door. The chrome stacks on the cab. The frost on the windshield that made it impossible to see who was behind the wheel. Just that shape, that shadow, sitting there, driving. Then it pulled out to pass. The truck swung into the oncoming lane and accelerated, drawing alongside me. I stared at it through my driver's side window, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The cab was right there, maybe 20 feet away. I could see the door, the window, the mirror. The window was dark, completely dark, like there was nothing inside the cab at all. No driver, no light, just emptiness. But the truck kept moving, kept accelerating. It pulled ahead of me, past me, and moved back into the right lane. Then it did the same thing to Buck, swinging out and passing him, pulling ahead of both of us. And then it was gone. The taillights disappeared into the darkness ahead, swallowed by the night and the distance. One moment they were there, and the next moment they were not. The truck had passed us and driven on and left us behind. I eased off the accelerator, my hands shaking on the wheel. My breath was coming in ragged gasps. I felt like I had just run a marathon. Buck's voice came over the radio. "Vexler, are you all right? I do not know." What just happened? I do not know either. But it is gone. Whatever it was, it is gone. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that the nightmare was over, that we could finish our run and get out of here and never come back. But something told me it was not that simple. Something told me that Red's truck had not just passed us and driven away. It had gone somewhere, done something, and we were going to find out what. We drove on. The minutes crawled by. The barrens began to change, the flat tundra giving way to low, rolling hills, the first sign that we were approaching the edge of this empty place. I started to breathe easier, started to think that maybe we really were going to be okay. Then we came around a curve and saw the truck. It was stopped in the middle of the road, blocking both lanes, sitting there in the darkness like it was waiting for us. Buck hit his brakes and I hit mine. We stopped about 50 yards back, our headlights illuminating Red's truck. It was not moving, the engine was not running. The lights were off, it was just sitting there, dead, empty. Exactly like it had been when we found it the first time. "No," I said, "no, that is not possible." Buck did not answer. He just sat there in his truck, staring at the thing in front of us. I grabbed my radio. "Buck, what do we do?" His voice came back slowly, like he was having trouble forming words. "We have to move it. We cannot get around it. The road is too narrow. I do not want to go near that thing, neither do I. But we do not have a choice." He was right. The hills pressed in on both sides of the road here. Steep embankments that our trucks could not climb. The only way forward was through. The only way through was past Red's truck. Buck climbed down from his cab. After a moment, I did the same. The cold hit me like a physical blow. It was worse here than it had been in the open barrens, the air dense and sharp, cutting through my gear like it was not there. I walked toward Red's truck, my boots crunching on the frozen road. Buck fell in beside me. We approached the cab slowly. The door was closed. The windows were dark. There was no sound, no movement, no sign that anyone was inside. Buck reached the door first. He stood there for a moment, his hand on the handle. Then he pulled it open. The cab was empty, just like before. No driver, no body, nothing but frost and darkness, and the smell of cold metal. The steering wheel was covered in ice. The seat was covered in ice. Everything was frozen solid, like the truck had been sitting here for years instead of minutes. I looked at the dashboard. The keys were in the ignition. The odometer showed the same mileage it had shown when we found the truck the first time. "This truck did not drive anywhere," I said. "It has not moved. The mileage is the same." Buck was staring at the interior. His face was pale. Then, what passed us on the road? What did we see? I did not have an answer. We checked the trailer. It was empty, unlocked. No cargo, no sign that anything had ever been inside. Just bare metal walls and a floor covered in frost. "We need to move it," Buck said. "We will put it in neutral and push it off the road. Then we keep going and we do not look back." I did not argue. I just wanted to get away from this thing. Get away from whatever it was or whatever was using it. Buck climbed into the cab and released the parking brake. The truck did not want to move at first. The frozen tires stuck to the road. But we pushed, and it started to roll, slowly, grudgingly. We guided it toward the shoulder, toward the embankment where it would be out of our way. That was when I saw the license plate. It was on the back of the trailer, illuminated by the glow of my flashlight. A Northwest Territories plate, white letters on a polar bear background. I read the number automatically without thinking about it. Then I stopped. I knew that number. I had seen it before, not on Red's truck. Somewhere else. Somewhere recent. "Buck," I said, "what is the plate number on Truman's truck?" He looked at me. He recited the number from memory. The same number that was on the plate in front of me. "Now, look at your paperwork. The shipping manifest. What is the plate number listed for Keegan's truck? The one that was supposed to be the third rig in our convoy." Buck stared at me for a long moment. Then he pulled out his manifest and found the entry. His face went white. "It is the same," he said. "The same plate number. That was not possible. Every truck had a unique plate. Two different vehicles could not have the same registration, unless they were not two different vehicles, unless they were the same truck. Keegan backed out of this run at the last minute," I said. "Family emergency. That is what you told me. But what if he did not back out? What if something happened to him?" Buck was shaking his head. No, I talked to dispatch. They said he called in sick." "Did you talk to Keegan?" He did not answer. He did not have to. We both knew the truth. He had not talked to Keegan. He had not confirmed anything. He had just taken dispatch at their word and moved on. But dispatch was back in Inuvik. They only knew what they were told. If someone had called in claiming to be Keegan, claiming to have a family emergency, they would have no way to verify it. No way to know if it was really him. No way to know if he was already out here on the road. Already part of whatever was happening in the Barrens. "We need to go," Buck said. "We need to get to the camp and call this in. All of it. Red's truck, the plate numbers, everything." I agreed. We left Red's truck on the shoulder and went back to our rigs. I climbed into my cab and started the engine and tried not to think about what we had just discovered. Tried not to think about what it meant. Keegan's truck. Red's truck. The same plate number. Two drivers who had gone into the Barrens and not come out. And now their trucks were here, waiting for us, following us, blocking our path. Like they were trying to tell us something. Or stop us from getting through. We pulled around Red's truck and continued down the road. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see it start up again, expecting to see those headlights appear behind us. But there was nothing. The road stayed dark. The truck stayed where we had left it. For now. The camp appeared on the horizon about 2 hours later. Lights blazing in the darkness. The most beautiful thing I had ever seen. We had made it. We had gotten through the Barrens. We were safe. But even as I pulled into the camp and shut down my engine, I could not shake the feeling that it was not over. That something had followed us out of that empty place. That the Barrens had let us go, but only for now. Only until it was ready to take us back. I climbed down from my cab and stood in the cold, looking back the way we had come. The darkness was absolute out there. No lights, no movement, nothing to see. But I knew they were out there. Red and Keegan, driving the same truck, waiting on the same road. And sooner or later we would have to go back. Sooner or later, everyone goes back. We stayed at the camp for 2 days. That was not the plan. The plan was to unload, rest for a few hours, and head back to Inuvik. But the weather turned bad the night we arrived. A storm system moving in from the northwest that dropped visibility to 0 and made travel impossible. We were stuck. I did not mind. I was in no hurry to go back through the Barrens. Buck spent most of those 2 days on the radio and the satellite phone, trying to get information, trying to understand what we had seen. He called dispatch, called the territorial police, called everyone he could think of who might have answers. What he found out only made things worse. Keegan was missing. He had not called in sick. He had not had a family emergency. He had left Inuvik 2 days before we did, running a solo load to a different camp on the Delta. He had checked in at the fuel cache, reported good conditions, said he expected to reach his destination by nightfall. He never arrived. Sound familiar? The police had already started a search, but the storm was hampering their efforts. They were focusing on the route between the fuel cache and Keegan's destination, which was north of where we had been. But Buck and I knew better. We knew that Keegan had not gone north. He had gone into the Barrens. And the Barrens had taken him, just like they had taken Truman Red 3 years before. The plate numbers matched. That was the thing I could not get out of my head. Red's truck and Keegan's truck had the same registration. That was impossible. It violated every law of logic and bureaucracy. But we had both seen it. We had both read the numbers. They were the same. I tried to come up with explanations. A clerical error, a database glitch, counterfeit plates. But none of them made sense. Red and Keegan had driven for different companies. Their trucks had been registered years apart. There was no way they could have ended up with the same plate number by accident. Unless it was not an accident. Unless something had made it happen. The storm cleared on the morning of the 3rd day. The sky opened up, pale and cold, and the wind died down to almost nothing. Perfect driving conditions. No excuse to stay any longer. Buck found me in the camp's mess hall, drinking coffee and staring at nothing. "We need to go," he said. "The longer we wait, the harder it gets." He was right. I knew he was right. But I did not want to go back out there. I did not want to drive through the Barrens again, past the place where we had found Red's truck, past the hills where it had blocked the road. I did not want to see those headlights in my mirrors. I finished my coffee and went to my truck. We pulled out of camp around noon, Buck in the lead again. The road was clear, the visibility excellent. I could see for miles in every direction. There was nothing out there. Nothing but snow and ice and the long white line of the road cutting through it. We entered the Barrens about 3 hours into the drive. I felt it immediately. That heaviness. That sense of being watched. The air felt thicker here, the silence deeper. Like the land itself was paying attention. Like it knew we were back. I kept my eyes on the road and my hands on the wheel and tried not to think about what might be waiting for us. Tried not to think about Red and Keegan and the truck with the impossible plates. The hills appeared ahead, the narrow pass where the truck had blocked the road. I felt my chest tighten as we approached. I did not want to see it again. I did not want to know if it was still there. It was not. The shoulder where we had pushed it was empty. No truck, no sign that anything had ever been there. Just snow and rock and the road stretching on toward the horizon. Buck came on the radio. "It is gone, I see that." We kept driving, I kept checking my mirrors, but there was nothing behind us, nothing ahead of us. The Barrens were empty, just like they were supposed to be. We reached the fuel cache without incident, topped off our tanks, checked our equipment, got back on the road. Another few hours, and we would be in Inuvik. Another few hours, and this would all be over. That was what I told myself. The sun was setting when I saw the truck. It was on the side of the road, same spot where we had found it 3 days ago. The same truck, Red's truck, sitting there like it had never moved, like we had dreamed everything that happened in the Barrens. Buck stopped. I stopped behind him. We sat in our cabs and stared at the truck through our windshields. Neither of us wanted to get out. Neither of us wanted to go near it again, but we had to know. We climbed down and walked toward the truck. The cold was not as bad here, the wind blocked by the terrain. But I was shivering anyway. Shivering from something that had nothing to do with temperature. The truck looked exactly the same as before. Old and weathered, covered in frost. Tires flat, paint faded. Like it had been sitting here for 30 years instead of 3. Buck reached the cab and opened the door. He looked inside for a long moment. Then he turned to me. "You need to see this." I climbed up onto the running board and looked into the cab. There were 2 logbooks on the seat, 2 of them, side by side. One old and worn, the one we had found before. The other newer, less weathered. Buck handed me the newer one. I opened it to the last entry. November 14th. Departed fuel cache 14:30. Weather clear. Ice conditions good. Will reach camp by nightfall. November 14th. 4 days ago. The day Keegan had left for his run. The day he had disappeared. I looked at the handwriting. It was not Red's handwriting. It was different. Neater. More careful. Keegan's handwriting. Both logbooks were in the same truck. Both drivers had made their last entries before driving into the Barrens. Both of them had vanished without a trace. And somehow, both of their records had ended up here. In this cab. In this truck that belonged to neither of them and both of them at the same time. I put the logbook back on the seat. My hands were shaking. "We need to call this in," I said. Buck nodded. His face was gray. We went back to our trucks and Buck made the call. Police. Search and rescue. Everyone. He told them what we had found, where it was, what it might mean. They said they would send a team out immediately. They said they would take it from there. We got back on the road and drove to Inuvik. We did not stop again. We did not look back. We just drove until we saw the lights of the town and knew we were out of the Barrens for good. I gave a statement to the police the next morning. Told them everything. The truck appearing out of nowhere. The headlights following us. The plate numbers that matched. The 2 logbooks in the same cab. They wrote it all down and nodded politely and looked at me like I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. The investigation went on for weeks. They found Keegan's truck about 10 miles from where we had seen Red's, buried in a snowdrift just off the road. It was empty. No driver. No sign of what had happened. The plate number was different from the one on Red's truck. Normal. Legal, nothing unusual. But I knew what I had seen. Buck knew what he had seen. We had both read those plates and they had been the same. The same number on 2 different trucks. I requested a copy of the accident file from Red's disappearance 3 years ago. I do not know why, I just felt like I needed to see it. Needed to understand. The file arrived a week later. I sat in my apartment and went through it page by page. Police reports, search records, witness statements. All the documentation of a man who had vanished into the Barrens and never come back. And there, in the vehicle registration section, I found what I was looking for. Truman Red's license plate number. The same number I had seen on his truck. The same number I had seen on Keegan's manifest. The same number. I looked at the date on the registration. 3 years ago. Before Keegan's truck was even purchased. Before Keegan had started driving for the company. Before any of this had happened. The plates had matched. They had always matched. From the very beginning. I closed the file and sat there for a long time, trying to understand. Trying to make sense of something that could not make sense. 2 drivers. 2 trucks. The same plate number. One disappears, then the other. Their logbooks end up in the same cab. Their trucks end up on the same road. Like they were connected. Like they were the same person. Like the Barrens had taken them and merged them together into something that was neither one nor the other. I do not drive the northern routes anymore. I put in for a transfer the day after I got that file. Southern runs only. Nothing above the 60th parallel. The company did not ask why. Maybe they had heard the stories. Maybe they knew. Buck still drives the Barons. I talked to him last month and he said he had not seen anything unusual. No headlights following him. No trucks appearing out of nowhere. Everything normal. Everything quiet. But he also said he drives faster through that section now. Does not stop at the fuel cache after dark. Does not look in his mirrors more than he has to. He knows something is out there. He knows it is waiting. I think about Red and Keegan sometimes, late at night when I cannot sleep. I think about them driving through the Barrens, alone and lost, heading toward destinations they would never reach. I think about their logbooks sitting side by side in that frozen cab. Their last words written on those pages. Weather clear. Ice conditions good. We'll reach camp by nightfall. They thought they were going to make it. They thought they were going to be okay. I wonder if they ever realized they were wrong. The police closed the case on Keegan 2 months ago. Insufficient evidence. No body, no explanation. Just another driver who went out on the road and did not come back. Another name on the list. Another file in the cabinet. But I know the truth. I know that somewhere out there, in the Barrens, the truck is still waiting. Red's truck. Keegan's truck. The truck that is both of them and neither of them. And I know that someday it will find another driver. Someone running alone. Someone who does not know the stories. Someone who thinks they can drive through the Barrens and come out the other side. They will see the headlights in their mirrors. They will hear the tapping on their windows. They will find the truck blocking the road. And when the police search the cab, they will find 3 log books. 3 drivers, same plate. The Barons are patient, the Barons are hungry, and the Barons are never finished taking.